Great, thank you. Good morning and welcome to Places and Resources Overview Committee meeting of whatever the date is today, May the 22nd. Is that right? Yes. Just a reminder that when you use your microphones, can you please turn them off after you've spoken? Also, every time you wish to speak, can you please say who you are, what ward you represent if you're a councillor, or what officer position you have, etc. That will really help things come along smoothly. Okay, we're then moving on to item 1, apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor Richard Crabb.
Councillor Jesperson.
A pedantic note. In the agenda, it lists Mike Parks is on this committee. I think has he not been replaced on this committee by Councillor Pothecary? So just double check. I wouldn't want him to be misrepresented as
I think you have to have depends on which edition of the minutes you've got or agenda you've got. Sorry, the copy I've got here, which is the current one, the change has been made and Val is recognised as being here now. Okay, is there any other apologies? No? Good. Right, minutes of the meeting held on 13th of March. Are people happy that it's a true and accurate record of that meeting? Yes? Great. Great, thank you very much. I'll sign that shortly. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? No declarations of interest. We have no public participation today, and we have no formal questions from councillors either. So on to item 6, the Growth and Economic Regeneration Strategy, to be introduced by Nick Webster. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just to hear Nick Webster, Head of Economic Growth and Regeneration. Hopefully Cabinet and colleagues have read the reports into the growth strategy. Just to give you a bit of context, a bit of background, we had a previous strategy which ran till 2024. It's been a long-standing ambition to look at a different approach to economic growth, particularly to take into account some of the challenges we've had recently around perhaps the impact of Brexit, the impact of the COVID pandemic, and some of the different operating processes that businesses now face themselves under. So those have been some of the drivers behind the need to have a refreshed economic growth strategy. And we've been working with colleagues across the council and indeed within the business community and looking at how we might take forward the strategy itself. Members will be aware that we've had a number of engagement sessions with members where some of their thoughts and feedback have been taken into account within the strategy, and we look to incorporate those ideas either within the strategy itself or within other council policies and procedures that could be taken forward across a range of different policies, for example, the local plan. So to give you a bit of background around, I suppose, the development of the strategy and where we are as an economy, Dorset, as you'd expect, significant economy, incorporates around about 20,000 businesses, generates over 8.4 billion pounds worth of gross value added, so productivity to the national economy, and supports over 145,000 jobs locally. Significant in national terms. What we've looked at within the strategy is how can we address some of our key challenges that we have within that economy. So we know that we've got a lack of skilled labour. When we go out and see businesses, that's inevitably some of the things that they look to inform us about, some of the challenges that we know they have, trying to attract people with the right skills into their business to enable their growth. We know we've got a really high house price to wage affordability ratio. So people who are in employment and are on the average wage find it really difficult to afford the average house, and that ratio is high, and that is an inhibitor to people coming and living and working within the county. We know, again, businesses have reported that members of staff that they've tried to attract into their businesses have cited that as a reason why it's difficult for them to come and work within Dorset. And then lastly, one of our fundamental challenges we've had low productivity over the last 25 years. We've achieved around about a 6% productivity growth within our economy. And so that's quite low in terms of both the regional average and indeed the national average and national figures as well. So, and as you'll probably be aware, the British economy hasn't been particularly well performing on an international scale for a number of years. So we're a low productivity county in a low productivity region within a low productivity kind of country. And that's obviously reflected in some of the issues around things like your average wages. Productivity and wages are connected, and obviously the higher the wages indicates a higher skilled job, which leads to greater productivity. So those are some of the challenges that we're having to overcome and address and look to identify within the strategy itself. So, but we think there are a number of really significant opportunities that can enable us to take that forward and to meet those challenges head on. So what we've tried to do is bring those out within the strategy, and I'll go into some of those in a bit of detail later on. In addition, we think we've got good alignment with government policy at the moment. So some of the key kind of government policy and strengths that they are trying to promote, we're also kind of like we also have good strengths within those areas. So for example, defence, we've got a significant number of defence businesses. We obviously know that there's going to be increased government spending in the defence sector. Energy and energy production, we've got some really fantastic energy, clean energy opportunities within the Dorset economy, and that's again a focus of the current government. As is sovereign capability and making sure that we've got onshore capability to deal with those kind of national and international challenges, and defence and energy and food production are all real strengths of the Dorset economy which we can build on. So what we're looking for the growth strategy that was contained within the report is to focus on where we have strengths within our local economy and use those to address our economic challenges. And so we're building on some really firm foundations. What we're looking to do within the strategy is break the current cycle of low growth. And that, as I said, has happened over a 25-year period. It's meant that we've not had the wage increases we might have wanted. It's meant that we've not been able to attract the high-skilled jobs that we believe would benefit the Dorset economy. And so what we're trying to, how we've set that out is through a series of ambitions that we would like to focus our attention, our resources behind. And I'm going to go through those in order, if I may. So clean energy. We've got a number of key opportunities in the South Dorset economy in clean energy production, ranging from offshore wind through carbon capture and storage to potentially small modular reactors. Those, we're in active discussions with project promoters, we're in active discussions with Portland Port around some of those, and they form a really fundamental opportunity for us, both in terms of the construction process that those might bring in and the investment, but also the long-term sustainable jobs that they would also create. It's a really, really significant opportunity for us, matches the government's agenda right now, and would generate significant numbers of job opportunities that can make a real difference to our economy. We've got an ambition to be innovative and focus on innovation, wherever that might be, whether that's in companies across Dorset or whether, more specifically, it's on the Innovation Park at Winthrith. And what we're looking to achieve there, and we've already set out, and the Cabinet made a decision a couple of months ago, is to set up an arm's length company. And with the Innovation Park, we're looking to use that as a catalyst for growth within those companies that have innovation as their kind of drivers, particularly around defence innovation, working with small SMEs, working with universities, using the new company to help drive some of that, bring all of those partners together and work with our SME base within the county. We're also looking at bringing in higher education provision alongside of some of that, utilising some of the partners that we might have across the administrative border in BCP, but also on a kind of wider basis, and we're already working with universities like Plymouth and Exeter on some of those kind of projects. We've got an ambition to look at the regeneration of Weymouth. Members will be aware of some of the existing levelling up projects around Weymouth Harbour and Marina, and what that might do in terms of the regeneration of the town and some of the sites that the council owns, and what that might lead to in terms of job opportunities and investment and the profile of Weymouth. And we're looking at how that can then link into some of our other projects and actually then form a kind of a growth node within the South Dorset economy. We've got an ambition for jobs within that. And that is county-wide. It's looking at engagement with our biggest and our best businesses. It's looking at identifying where our high-growth companies are going to be. It's looking at putting officer resource to help support those companies with their growth ambitions. It's looking to align some of our government funding behind those businesses so they're actually targeted. Looking at, obviously, trying to address the private sector productivity challenge that I've mentioned previously by supporting those higher growth related businesses. As I mentioned previously, we're looking at university and skills and how do we improve the skills offer, working with Weymouth College, working with our higher education providers across the patch, and looking at actually bringing those into the county, whether or not it's through their graduates, whether it's through specific programs, whether or not it's actually a physical presence. So trying to attract university provision and upgraded skills provision into the county. And then lastly, there's an ambition for market towns and tourism, and recognising that each of those market towns has an individual strength and that we can work with local communities to identify regeneration opportunities, job opportunities within those market towns and help them develop plans and proposals that they could then bring forward to attract further funding, whether it's private sector or public sector. And that may well be linked into the kind of wider tourism offer. We've got a fantastic tourism sector, as I'm sure many of you will know, be aware of. What we're looking to do is grow that, grow both the, I suppose, the range of that, so the kind of the season, so trying to expand the amount of time that people spend here and the amount of money that people spend here within the local economy as well. As a strategy, it represents a bit of a departure from previous approaches where we've had a bit of a kind of a blanket cover-all type approach, but this is a really focused strategy on those key ambitions, but it still has roots in the cornerstones of our economy. So the market towns, our key sectors such as defence and tourism and agriculture. And it's and I think I'll end my presentation there, if I may. I don't know whether Richard, you have anything to say?
Yes, Councillor Biggs is the other portfolio holder. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, Richard Biggs, property and assets, and importantly, economic growth. I think Nick has explained that very well, that the depth with which this goes into, but to sort of simplify it, I think the previous plan, as it's been said by some, is spread the jam too thinly. This is a really focused strategy with clear and ambitious targets, and the word ambitious comes up many times, and I make no apology for that because it is ambitious and some of those targets are going to be a real challenge for us, which is why I'm very keen to see that the EAP cross-party group, for those willing to attend, will continue, as we said in the amended motion that went to council and was withdrawn. So that, I think, is important because we need to be held to account for those. And we need to be able to change direction because things do change and just you can't set things in stone. And if government policy changes on energy or whatever, or things change in defence, we may have to rethink, sort of amend things. But I think the purpose of the working group was really to look at the drivers behind it. So there will be elements which are not covered within that because they're covered by other plans. So particularly housing is key to the infrastructure. If people haven't got anywhere to live, that will impact on there. So other plans feed into that. And obviously the local plan is very much driving where we want economic growth, where it's going to go in terms of industrial estates, etc. And good to see that. I see that Ferndown industrial estate is expanding, which is great news. There's some real positives in the economy in Dorset at the moment, and I think it's really good to latch into this. We got a great opportunity here, but obviously you have all had a chance to read it, and maybe you've got some points that perhaps we can expand on and learn from. So very much interested to hear everyone's views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. The structure which we operate under is for people who are not members of the committee to go first in terms of asking questions and making any points they want to raise. So if there's a councillor who wants to speak who's not a member of this committee, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few points, and I don't know whether you want me to go through them and then take them all, or one by one. But first of all, what I would say is that the larger businesses, which we're going to give one-to-one dedicated support, only represents 1% of our businesses in Dorset. And I'm a little bit worried that our smaller businesses are just sort of being, not exactly cast aside, but they need a lot more support. Our smaller businesses, can you imagine just if every small business employed just one extra person, we would have, things would be remarkably different. So that's what I really wanted to point out there. In terms of, I'm very confused on the University on Care being on care, basically. I mean, we're talking about becoming a high growth economy, but those in the care sector generally earn living wage, just above living wage. They're on low wages. And yet we're focusing heavily on sort of green energy, energy efficiency. Why on earth are we not looking at a university on renewable energy engineering and so on and so forth? I mean, Kingston University do a very good course there, giving an MSc. I don't understand why we're focusing on care. I'm not saying care is not, of course it's important in this area, but can we also consider how we can, if we're really going to become the #1 area in the UK for renewable energy, why are we not focusing with higher education in that respect? And I think that we also need to be looking a little bit more holistically at our base of residents. 41,200 people aged between 16 and 64 are economically inactive. Now, that's a little bit lower than the average in England, but it is above the Southwest average. And out of those 41,200, only 6,500 want a job. So I just wonder whether we should be doing a little bit more work in that respect. 11,600 people are on long-term sick. Is that because our NHS have got delays in providing remedial operations and so on? So I think we need to be working a little bit more holistically in that respect. Now, also, everything seems to, in this council, seems to focus around Weymouth. I understand the beaches and so on and so forth. But in terms of ambitions around tourism, I understand that a number of the Dorset Council-owned hotels and guest houses are being faced with very large increases in rent, along with a change in policy around repairs. And I think this is going to cause a huge problem to some of our long-term residents. So I think we need to prioritise. Are we prioritising our own income above our own businesses that have served Weymouth well? And I think that needs to be looked at. And finally, I'm going to finish on the north of Dorset. The north of Dorset, 46% of people in Dorset live in a rural area. And certainly in the north, we suffer dreadfully from a lack of transport. So to get from Sturminster Newton to a business in Wimborne, well, that's impossible if you don't have a car. And I just wonder whether we need more emphasis for the north of Dorset. And I would actually like us to consider, and I put forward a recommendation that we could consider some sort of technical college for manual skills to be based in the north. I think I'll leave it there for the moment. I've got loads more I could say, but I mean, I'll be here all morning, so thank you for your patience.
Okay, well, that's a good start for a few subjects there. Do you want to comment on those?
Is that working now? Yeah, I'll come back on the point about business engagement and working with the larger businesses, and do absolutely take the point that those large businesses will only be perhaps 1% of the total business base within the county, but they will employ much greater proportion of our workforce than 1%. What we're looking to do with our, I suppose, our jobs ambition is look at our business engagement on a whole scale. So there will be those businesses that we identify as having high growth opportunities. Those are the ones that are going to help us with our productivity challenge. Those are the ones we're going to look at having a direct relationship with. There are going to be opportunities for businesses across the piece, though, so whether they're SMEs, micro enterprises, whether they're your bog standard business. Not going to stereotype any of them, but any of those businesses that need support will have that opportunity through what we call our Growth Hub service, which will provide generic business advice, business support. It will provide access to information. It will be a web-based service. But what we're looking to do is focus our limited officer resource on attracting or addressing or dealing with those businesses that have got the highest growth potential, because that's where you're going to get the most value added for your engagement. So working with our biggest businesses, because they've obviously got the highest profile, they've got the biggest workforces, it's important to retain them, it's important to keep them, important to look to see whether they can grow, but also working with our businesses across the patch that do have that high growth potential that can turn them, those small businesses, into the next bigger businesses. Okay.
Do you want to pick up any of my other points?
Good morning. I have the joy of picking up the other points. So, sorry, Chair. Matthew Piles, I'm the Strategic Director in place, leading on economic growth. So, universities. We're looking at a number of universities and a number of opportunities for ambitions. So, at the moment, in the Sea Life Centre in Weymouth, Exeter University are looking at carbon and hydrogen, and we're working with them. It's a broad brush of what we're trying to attract to the area, and it's not just for Weymouth, it's for Dorset. Your point on transport, with my previous hat on, if I may, it's linked to the bus service improvement plan. And economic growth is about everything we deliver in place. It's not purely about the economic development team, the planning authority, the highway authority, the transport authority. We all have a part to play across Dorset. I know colleagues in assets and property are looking at the hotel estate, and the review hasn't actually started yet. There are individual conversations going on with individual hotels, but I know if colleagues were here, they could answer more detailed on that point. We may come back to you on that, if I may, after the meeting. Thank you.
I'd just like to make one further point to address your point about economically inactive people. Recently, the government launched its Get Britain Working white paper and strategy. We've been tasked with developing a Get Britain Working plan that's across the pan-Dorset geography, so working with BCP colleagues, where that effectively looks at exactly what you've just said, is how do you raise the economically active proportion of people to meet the government's target of about 80% of the population, or the working age population. At the moment, we're around about 76. So that's something that we're actively having to work on. We've got to have that plan in place by September. It'll have to go through, obviously, an engagement process with businesses, our NHS colleagues and other people, but that's something that government have tasked us with developing over the next few months. Okay.
Thank you very much. I just wonder whether it might be possible to have a point in our recommendations that perhaps if we can attract a new business into Dorset that's currently not here at the moment, could we actually give them, say, 3 years business rates free? Because I think something like that would actually attract new business into Dorset and would be fantastic. I mean, that actually is a firm point, I think would be something really welcome in this strategy.
It's something we can have a conversation about internally, but I'd probably make the point that if the business isn't paying the business rates, they're still due, so the council would have to pay those rates to government. So it's something that obviously would have financial implications for us as an authority. But it's obviously something we can take away and have a discussion about.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on, Councillor Brenton, I believe you have some comments online. Alex, did you hear you're up? No, she's gone. Which is the next person I saw hand up, Councillor Wilson. Oh.
Councillor Ben Wilson, South East Purbeck Ward. Like Councillor Jones, I've got a few comments. Some I've already shared with the portfolio holder. In particular, I'd like to see the strategy be clearer on how agriculture and agribusiness fit in to Dorset. And also, I'd like to just make clear that there needs to be an emphasis on digital infrastructure as one of the foundational elements of growing our economy. And I know it is in the strategy, but I just wanted to reiterate that point. The area I just wanted to really focus on was Section 6, ambitious for market towns and tourism, because I believe this actually captures, geographically at least, a majority of the county of Dorset and has the widest impact. I feel that tourism can often fall between two stools. Quite often, tourism, we consider it's there, it works, and with some tweaking, we're comfortable. It's a big part of our economy. The other stool it sits between is actually being the culprit for driving some of our job insecurity, our low skill, low pay economy that is referenced in this document, and what we're really looking to lift the economy out of. When I read what's written in here and I read the actions that have been put against the role of Visit Dorset, a lot of them are very marketing focused, and I would almost argue that they're already doing those. Visit Dorset already plays that role. What I'm very keen to see, and I'm talking from a ward perspective as much as anything else, is that we create the right conditions to stabilise the economy around tourism, and we do proactively lift the business, the tourism economy away from that low skill, low pay sector. Almost echoing, again, some of the comments Councillor Jones makes, we really need to create the right business conditions for the hospitality industry. There are plenty of case studies across the UK where attracting, and dare I say, a higher end offering in that sector has had phenomenal trickle-down effects into the broader economy and has really contributed to the regeneration of whole towns. And some of those are coastal towns, not dissimilar to Swanage, which is 2 miles from where I live, and many other towns across the Dorset coast. So really what I'm looking for is an assurance. It mentions that one of the actions against Section 6 is to have a coastal and market town strategy framework. I'm really looking for assurance that that strategy framework will not just focus on bringing visitors in and having the right kind of visitors and the right kind of economy, but that we do include the economic conditions for the hospitality industry so that we really can grow our offering in that sector and be active contributors to moving away from low skill, low pay for that sector.
This is Councillor Biggs.
So I'll pick up the agricultural bit first, because I think that's important, and that was my first observation when I looked through one of the earlier drafts, was that there was little mention of agriculture. There is mention until I started delving some of the reasons behind that, and agriculture is about less than 2% of Dorset's employment, including fishing. It is a very small number, and growth, to be frank, is not going to be within agriculture. That's a fact. If anything, farmers are queuing up to sell land for housing, as we know on various developments. So that's the politicians' thing, because I think officers might not want to say that, and I think it needs to be said. However, there is mention of agri-tech. Sorry, some of you saying you're struggling to hear me, so I'll go a bit nearer. There is mention of agri-tech, so particularly in the Innovation Park, 5G work has been done. We recently had a Turkish delegation looking at what has been done there for using drones, robot tractors, etc. And that sort of thing is where the growth will come. So if people come here to develop and design aids to help farmers, that probably won't mean more farming jobs, but it will mean in agri-tech, which will be well paid type jobs, there is opportunity in Dorset. So that's why. It doesn't mean to say by any shape or form that we don't value agriculture and the value of food production. And we mentioned within there food production and the value of those high quality products, Dorset produce. And I think that is important. The marketing of that is in there. But I'll leave my other colleagues to perhaps answer some of the other points. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, and just to continue what Councillor Biggs has said there about agriculture, I think from our perspective, if we can help agriculture in terms of its diversification, its added value to products, so looking at actually making the end products rather than the raw materials, if we can increase the number of farmers who are looking into going into manufacturing of individual products themselves, that leads to the wider kind of Dorset food and drink offer. It enables them to add value to their own products, makes them more sustainable, means they might take on more staff, at least looks at increased productivity. So things like that, if there's businesses that are going to be coming forward with those types of activities, they would absolutely be looked to be supported through our business engagement strategy and our focus on high growth companies. So just to say that actually from an agricultural perspective, there are opportunities for us to see higher productivity and higher growth potential there. Coming back onto the point about tourism, I think with tourism, Dorset's obviously got quite a range of offer. It's got a broad appeal. And I absolutely take the point that we should be looking at seeing where we could add value to that and how we can maximise the higher end and the higher value tourism offer. What we're looking to do is increase the range of spend that visitors make here, because obviously if they're staying here, that's only one part of their pound that they're spending within the county. If we can encourage them to go out to events, to businesses, to food and drink festivals, whatever it might be, they're spending that money over a wider range of businesses. So it's not just about tourism as an accommodation offer, which I think is probably the point the member was trying to make. It's actually about what's our wider tourism offer, our wider leisure offer, wider cultural offer that can encourage visitors to the county to spend their money here within the county. So it is absolutely looking at working across that kind of much wider sector. And I absolutely do take the point about the economic conditions, and that feeds into things like having suitable local plan policies that encourage tourism and tourism growth and tourism accommodation. It's about having the right kind of infrastructure in place. So I do absolutely take those points on board.
Sorry, Chair, I think it's quite important. Dorset has some fantastic destinations, and it's about celebrating what we have. Your point about towns changing because of their destination. For example, Weymouth and Swanage are renowned for food and seafood and really good offers. And there are other businesses across Dorset that do that. So I think it's about reinforcing what we can celebrate and market about coming to Dorset as a destination. And I think sometimes we forget that we have some very successful businesses in Dorset that we need to support and actually celebrate.
Thank you. Sorry, go on.
I do apologise. Digital. The whole digital infrastructure, cybersecurity is at the heart of everything we do. It sort of is inbred about the future. And Nick and Richard, Councillor Biggs, are aware that we are dealing with large defence manufacturing companies that are based in Dorset, of how we support them to expand, and then what infrastructure we need within Dorset communities to allow that expansion. It's really important, and as we speak, colleagues are actually at a national conference speaking to the national digital leads about how we get Dorset to the top of that agenda. So it is part of the economic thread and the strategy.
Right. That answer pretty much what you're saying? Yes? Yeah, okay. Councillor Brenton, are you there with us now?
Yes, I am.
Did you want
Thank
to
you.
ask a question?
Well, it's probably more of a pointer than a question, but look, the elephant in the room, as far as I can see, is we can celebrate agriculture, we can celebrate products, etc. We can celebrate tourism. But how are these people going to get there? Our infrastructure of roads is pretty poor. So actually, especially in the north of the county, so what is in the economic growth area to actually improve links? I know we have the bus improvement plan, but that really doesn't reach everywhere, and nobody's going to come to Dorset from, say, London and tour about on buses. It just ain't going to happen. So that was one. We actually need to think, and it would be lovely if the strategy had some network ideas for making hubs in North Dorset. And my point is, it doesn't mention anything about reusing Dorset's property, such as some of the small farms and small farm buildings, which are county farms in the north of the county, to become sort of craft hubs where we could teach, or people would learn skills, and they would become skilled people. They would become a tourist hub in its own right. And I think it's a pity there's nothing in there about that, actually targeting something in North Dorset, which helped education and skills. The other bit is, the other elephant in the room is, you can improve Winfrith Green, or whatever we call it these days, Innovation Centre, as much as you like, but you've got to come in over Wool level crossing, which causes traffic jams twice an hour every day of the year. And in summer, that can get quite ridiculous. The other way out is, a lot of firms will not come to Winfrith because it is difficult to go north. And it's all very well saying, oh, they've got to go to Dorchester and then up to Yeovil. But what they want to do is cut through the villages and go up through Blandford to the 350. We've got, very poor access. So why don't we mention somewhere in our economic strategy, liaising or pressurizing Network Rail to think about putting a train siding across the fence into Winfrith Innovation Park? It's right next door. It is an opportunity that is just ignored. So instead, I have a brother who wanted to locate a business in Winfrith, looked at the infrastructure and said, no, it's going to take too long to get stuff in and out. So it's a pity it's not in the plan. And the other bit is when it comes to apprenticeships. There is something in there, thank goodness, about supporting apprenticeships, but it must include encouraging smaller businesses to take on apprentices, which often they don't like to do because of the paperwork and the difficulty foreseen in it. And I think it should be, big companies will take on apprentices because they've got that infrastructure. But a small company, a two-man building firm, won't take on an apprentice because they spend most of the time filling in paperwork. So have we got any way of easing that? Because like Carol Jones said, if only we could, if all the small businesses took on one more person, that would help considerably. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenton. Whichever you want to start.
Thank you, Councillor. I will try and answer the questions in order, if I may. Your infrastructure, core heart to the economic strategies, because it's part of the local transport plan, that is part of the local plan. It's part of the plan for Dorset. And we are considering improvements within Dorset of how we connect north, south, east and west. Infrastructure in relation to rail, we are in discussions and we'll continue our discussions with Network Rail and the businesses with that. I was actually in Winfrith yesterday with one of the larger businesses, and what they were saying to me is they love working in Winfrith because they love living in Dorset. Their workforce actually moved to Dorset. There's not a better place to be than where we live. What we need to do is speak to them about how we improve that access. You are correct, there is a siding in Winfrith, and we are looking at that as part of the future expansions. But I think what's really important is that we need to help businesses connect. So a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment is speaking to the businesses about the apprenticeship opportunities, how they then connect with the education providers to make sure that the education providers are putting the right courses on for the apprenticeships for the future, for the skills they need for the future. And that's why we're spending a lot of time with colleagues in children's services. We're speaking to the partnerships, the schools, the head teachers, and in particular, and very important, spending time with the youth councils of Dorset, of actually understanding what our future generations aspire to be. And there's where the opportunity actually lies as part of this economic strategy, that it's owned by the whole community. I think Nick wants to pick up something on apprenticeships. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on apprenticeships, you members will probably be aware of the recent demise of the Dorset LEP. So that ceased to exist as a board at the end of March. That had a range of provisions, and one of those was a project called the Careers Hub. They managed that. They effectively got government funding to deliver that across both Bournemouth and Dorset. That's now a provision that's been brought in-house. So effectively, the council are now directly responsible for that Careers Hub, and we're working closely with colleagues across the council in terms of the implementation of that, and as Matt said, working with colleges and other training providers, trying to get across the range and depth of employment opportunities that are out there in the local economy. We have businesses saying to us all the time, we are really struggling to recruit, we're really struggling to get apprenticeships. Young people may not be aware of those opportunities. So the Careers Hub, which is now an in-house service and has been now for a couple of months, enables us to help address that, and is something we've got direct control over, as opposed to having the LEP having responsibility for it.
Thank you. Councillor Biggs?
Yes, I want to come back to Councillor Benton's point about sort of hubs and that use. You know, this document, as I said earlier, is not set in stone. If members think they have opportunities, particularly for a council-owned asset, you know, do come to us, and that doesn't exclude. Nothing is excluded in that respect. But obviously, that's within assets team. So the strategic asset management plan lays out the asset reviews, which are undertaken by class. And obviously the county farm estate is being looked at closely, and there may be elements there which would lend themselves to a different use, such as Councillor Brenton has indicated. So that's certainly something that wouldn't be excluded. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brenton, does that answer your point?
I'm glad to have raised them. Thank you very much.
Okay, next was Councillor Mercer.
Good morning, it's Steve Mercer from Blackmore Vale Ward. Could I make a couple of observations? One, just to address the point that Councillor Jones made about small business. On your growth board, would it be worthwhile having a member of the Federation of Small Business so that actually they do have a voice in that forum? Also, the Market Town strategy, believe it or not, there is a business on the Rolls Mill Business Park that has to have a tractor going all day long because they don't have enough electricity into that site. And energy infrastructure, you know, it is critical, particularly in those market towns. The one area that you talked about relating to tourism that we've not touched on yet is lengthening the tourism season. Now, I have some involvement with the tourism sector, and businesses themselves do all they can to build those shoulder months. I would just be interested what ideas you had to build those, to lengthen that season. And I know this may only be window dressing, but I would like to see our economic strategy centred into an investment office so that we actually have a shop front that we can market. You know, it has some it has some visibility and it has some purpose. And lastly, there are lots and lots of actions in this and lots of support. I'd just like to know what sort of implementation monitoring we're going to have going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies, just writing down the various different points. On the Growth Board and the FSB membership, that is absolutely part of the intended membership, alongside a lot of other business representation, so the Dorset Chamber, but also some of our key networks. So the Southwest Regional Defence and Security Cluster represents all of the, or a significant proportion of the Dorset defence businesses. We've been looking for representation from there, the same as, say, maybe Southwest Agritech, same as some of our engineering clusters, so that we actually get genuine business representation on that board, because that's what we need. We do need to understand what the business offer is, what the consequences of maybe some of the government's recent policies is having on them as on their business operations. So absolutely fundamentally agree with you on that point. In terms of energy provision, we know and we understand that energy provision and energy infrastructure is a significant barrier in some instances to economic growth in particular areas. It's a conversation we're having with the network providers on a consistent basis. It's obviously a conversation our planning colleagues are having, because that is fundamental to achieving our local plan targets. From our understanding, it's an issue that is across the Southwest and probably across the whole of the country in terms of how that current grid infrastructure is holding back our economic performance, and is obviously a national issue, but we're feeding into those conversations. In terms of lengthening the tourism season and what we might do with that, I've got a few ideas, but obviously welcome any other thoughts that members might have, and would happily take suggestions and emails back in. But effectively, we could be looking at having or supporting events and festivals outside of the normal kind of tourism season. We could look at kind of a different type of promotion, looking at maybe making more of actually our own internal spend, because tourists or visitors don't have to come from outside the area. It could be somebody from Dorset visiting another part of Dorset. It's about how do we maximise all of that. So I think there's a range of things we could do there, but as I say, would welcome suggestions. In terms of our having an investment office, I think that's actually a good suggestion that we could look to maybe take forward. We are looking at maybe what we do within the kind of the economic development and the digital infrastructure teams, and how can we look to support some of the key activities within this plan. Now, that might be something we look to focus in terms of an investment office. I've personally been, and I've got colleagues up in Leeds at the moment at the UK Real Estate and Inward Investment Forum, where we are promoting the county. We're looking at showcasing some of these opportunities. We sponsored a couple of events and panel discussions. So we are out there trying to promote the county to those kind of those investors and developers who might well be able to bring in private sector investment into the economy. And in terms of a monitoring and performance kind of framework going forwards, I think one of the things we'll have to develop once the strategy's adopted is a kind of an action plan, and how do we then look to have a further engagement around that. And that might be a role of the EAP going forwards, potentially to look at an ongoing kind of monitoring framework for that strategy. Okay.
Could I, if possible, just go back to the grid issue, the power issue? We have the opportunity of resolving the power issues in Dorset, working together with the Super Green Clean Energy Cluster. And it's probably the biggest opportunity. It's a once-in-a-generational opportunity. So I'll give you an example. The offshore wind proposal provides 350 megawatts back into the system. That will allow economic growth for Dorset. So I do apologise for handing out some literature, but it is really important to understand the significant ambition and the opportunity now by doing all the work that Nick and Councillor Biggs has outlined, because Councillor Bartlett, who is in the room, led a scrutiny review of the grid and power, and the biggest risk to Dorset and the economy was power for the future. I cannot overemphasise why we are focusing so hard, locally, regionally and nationally, to give Dorset that opportunity to be recognised to be the next green energy, and I'm not going to say this, superpower. because we do have that opportunity. So the literature explains what those opportunities are, the investment that could come, and that actually links the whole of the ambitious strategy that we've set out before you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer, do you want to come back on any of that? No? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who's not a member of the committee who still wants to say something? Yeah. Councillor Clifford. Okay.
Simon Clifford, Councillor for Chickerell Ward. Can I just say I'm really interested in the idea of the investment office. It's something I've been racking my brains of what more can we do. And if I could have a further conversation with Councillor Mercer and Councillor Jones to work out how that might look and what incentives we might have. It's not just the business rates incentives. We have a significant amount of tools and levers at our disposal, and perhaps we could have a further conversation and then try to turn that into something real. Some very specific areas, we touched on film there. Some set up their own film office, and it's really successful bringing films in. And that's because they've got some incentives that they can offer. So I'm very open to that conversation, and I know that my Cabinet colleagues will join me in that.
Thank you. Did you want to raise a point?
Thank you, Chairman. It's James Vitale, Councillor for Stourbridge and Marnell Ward. I'll just briefly engage with some of the things that have been said already. First, I wanted to associate myself with what Councillor Wilson said. I think he's absolutely correct. He took many of the things I wanted to raise myself. But the approach he set out on market towns, I think, is the right one. Councillor Jones's case on economic activity, I think, is central. I was glad to hear from the officers that that is something that they will be looking at when greater detail on government policy is going to come forward. But it's absolutely essential if we're to tackle low productivity. But it's not just an economic problem. It's a gross waste of human potential. The portfolio member, Councillor Biggs, said that one way to think about the way we've approached economic growth recently is that we've spread the jam too thinly, and that this approach will spread it more thickly and it will be more focused. Another way of sort of looking at that is the proposal is the council is going to pick particular industries and sectors and geographical areas in the county which are deserving of our support, and by omission identify those areas which are not potentially farming. Actually, what we need to be doing is making it easier for all our businesses in the county to compete. And I think there are two ways where we can really move the dial as a council. The first is energy, and the second is transport, because it's so connected with our labour markets. On energy, I was reassured by what the officer said, and I'm grateful for this leaflet. I think attracting investment in green energy generation is obviously very important, but I would like to know how that is going to benefit businesses across the county. For example, are we looking at community benefit agreements and things like that? The number of businesses that tell me that the thing that is killing their profitability and therefore their ability to take on new employees is energy costs. Of course, that's something we might be able to do something about. We can't do something about the NICS payments. The second bit is transportation. I've sort of been party to the hard work that Councillor Andrews is doing on this subject, and I know he's putting a real shift in for communities up and down the county. But connecting our labour markets to the jobs that we're hoping to create in this strategy is absolutely essential. In the budget several months ago, we basically introduced a flatlining of the highways and the transportation budget, which in real terms with inflation is a cut. That seems entirely incommensurate with a growth strategy which is making our labour markets more flexible and connecting it with the jobs of the future. So I would just like the views of the officer and the portfolio holder on this. Are we giving sufficient resource to our highways and transport budgets to actually connect our labour markets up well enough?
Can I thank the Councillor for the questions and thank you for the support with green energy. So firstly, all businesses in Dorset can actually be part of the green energy transformation or transition. And we know that there are companies across Dorset that are already in conversations with some of the promoters, particularly for offshore wind. We are blessed with these companies who we want to help expand for the future. And that's not just in South Dorset, that's North Dorset and East Dorset. That's the first thing. From a transport perspective from highways, as the ex-director of highways, you would expect me to say this, but I will say this. Most of the funding comes from the Department of Transport. That's not just for potholes, but that's for improvements. And actually, that's buses. We don't receive the revenue support grant that we should for public transport in Dorset, which Councillor Andrews is aware of. But we do a good job in Dorset for the money that we have within highways and transport and infrastructure. But in answer to your question, of course we'd like more. Sounds like a film now. But I'm sure Councillor Andrews may want to add to that.
Thank you. The truth is that we get a majority of our new road funding from central government. Our maintenance budget, yes, was pretty static, but hopefully it won't be by the end of or by the next round of funding. But we do maintain our highways very well. Our highways are of a good standard compared to other authorities in the area. And I commend our highways people for doing what they do with the budgets. No, we will continue. I mean, for instance, we are on the Western Gateway Strategic Transport Board, which have highlighted infrastructure projects that need to be carried out. So, for instance, the Northern Rail line, as I call it, that runs through Sherborne, Gillingham, up through that way. We have the infamous Tisbury Loop that we need to sort the problem out and get half-hourly runs into London. That is top of the Western Gateway Strategic Transport Board's priorities to get done. But that needs government funding as well. So, yeah, we totally understand our bus improvement plan. Money was totally inadequate for what we need, and it was made to give us capital. We didn't need capital, we need revenue, because we have to support those bus routes that are not financially viable. Otherwise, they won't be there. So that's the problem. And the previous portfolio holder had the similar problems. He would have loved to have done more, I know that, but couldn't because we didn't have the funding. Once again, rural counties get left in the doldrums.
Councillor Clifford, did you want to make a comment as well?
Yeah, just to support that, I think perhaps an area within the strategy that could be strengthened a little bit is the prize actually for major transport planning and infrastructure changes, devolution. There's not much in this report on devolution other than it will support things, but maybe that it needs to be strengthened a little bit. The council can do what it can do, as Councillor Andrews has pointed out. Budgets are limited and largely from central government, but working in a regional or a larger pot with Dorset and its surrounding councils and counties will give us much more bang for our buck, and that's where the big schemes might come from. So I would perhaps take on Councillor Vitale's point and say maybe we need a bit more oomph on devolution within the strategy.
Thank you for that. Yes. Did you have anything else you wanted to follow up on there?
If I may, Chair, just briefly, thank you for that response. Look, I think everyone who's a councillor down here knows that Dorset gets a pretty raw deal when it comes to government funding. We also know that well over 50% of what we do is sort of out of our control, is set for us on a statutory basis. Right. But I do think that there are political choices here. We have a set amount of resources that we have control over. We set a budget each year, and in that budget we set out what we prioritise. I'm positive. I think some of the things I've heard, particularly today, but in the past, about the ambitions for growth, are really pleasing to hear. But we need to see that in cash terms. We need to see that in budgetary terms. And I just set out that when there's another opportunity to look at this, I think this is an area where the council can make a real difference, and it deserves more resourcing. You're right that previous administrations had the same problems, but you guys are running the show now, and I think this is something you should look at. I just want to come back on the energy point one more time, and it's nice to hear that it's something that's going to hopefully affect in a positive way not just the south but also the north and the east. What are the particular mechanisms by which that's going to be the case? Not just in terms of the investment in the generation capacity, but how is it going to help local businesses in Dorset with their energy bills? There are ways we can do this. I just want to know if that thinking's being done. If it's not, happy to discuss it, but it should be in there, because the difference between an approach which just increases investment and one which reduces bills for businesses in Dorset is massive. It means that all sorts of businesses can compete better, and not just those ones in the green and renewable energy sector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a big...
No, I agree that energy costs are a real burden on businesses. There are things that we are looking at regarding solar farms that could be utilised for businesses. There's obviously a lot of grants available to help businesses be more efficient, which is about productivity again. Reduce your inputs. So if you can reduce your inputs for energy by being more efficient, using less energy through installation for alternate methods, through battery backups and all sorts of things, so there's information support for that. But I agree, more could be done. But I think waiting for the price to drop, is probably not a good method for businesses. And it's, in a way, it does drive people to force them to be more efficient, which is a good thing, because we're trying to use less energy, aren't we? Thank you.
Can I add one more thing, which is quite important to this discussion? If green energy is chosen for Dorset, one of the big things that happens is what they call social value. These firms who come in to invest in the communities will be looking at the supply chain, skills, training, and actually the points you've raised will be actually raised. And that's where we come in to help through the communities of Dorset to get the maximum economic value for the investment that's brought into the county and retain it within, it used to be called the Dorset Pound. There were discussions in the future about how do we make sure the Dorset Pound is maximised. And that's really high on our agenda, that we are discussing with these firms now what that would mean for the whole of Dorset. And I also forgot the west of the county, which I'll be picked up on in a minute. So hopefully that will help as well.
Sorry. In which case, I think we've had all the people who aren't members of the committee have said the words. We'll move on to the committee members now for the discussion. So the first person I see on the list is Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Taylor, Trump St Mary Ward, north of Dorchester. I'm going to pick up on some things. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Ben on a programme which we saw on Tuesday regarding the Councillor State of Dorset data, reports and information on Dorset. The reason I'm congratulating you is the fact that you picked up some significant points, was the fact that the population of Dorset is 385,000, the population of BCP is 395,000. So therefore, being regarded as a rural community, which is why we don't get our funding, by the way, from central government to match BCP, makes me a bit cross. So I think there could be a fair old argument to say that we have the population in both sectors to get equal footing. That's one thing I'm just observing on the side. Picked up on some points regarding the economic growth in the area, and we're attracting the people of business, maximum business, to come into Dorset, but are we actually looking at the business to say, could they actually be looking at providing housing for their new employees? I think there might be an idea there. We could actually look at a joint venture to say, you're bringing in the business, what about the housing as well? And probably a contribution to our infrastructure. So there's a thing that they're making money, making vast profits here, but have we actually got them tapping into what we need in our community as well? Also, I was looking at, and these are several questions, by the way, I do apologise, Chair. Also, the fact is, like, we've got one thing which is always a niggle in my mind, is the fact it's Weymouth and Portland. It is a deprived area, it's one of those deprived areas in Dorset, as we know. It shouldn't be labelled that way, but there always is the elephant in the room, is the pier needs to be sorted out, because it isn't. And therefore, it isn't sorted out. I'm afraid we've got trouble in Weymouth and Portland. I look at Portland as well. It's got vast housing and flats and this and the other, which aren't used. They're left empty. They've been empty for about 30 years. I'm thinking about the naval installation. And therefore, that could be a vast improvement on housing offsets to actually help people within the communities, especially the unfortunate as a class, as people who can't afford the maximum mortgages, which, coming back to Ben's report on the data, the maximum people have to buy is 10 times their salary in Dorset to actually purchase a house. Absolutely impossible. Not a problem. If I hadn't bought a house 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to buy one today. It's that bad. Coming in the final things as well at the harbour costs, I've already stated on that one, and the Bournemouth situation, which I look at quite interestingly because universities across the country are now shedding or not recruiting their students because they can't afford to go there. Therefore, the estates of the university accommodation is lying dormant or is being sold off. So we could probably look at the aspects of that to say, how can we look at that with business and within our local universities to see how we can actually obtain stock or look at businesses, obtain stock to support our business community, bring people to Dorset. So that's an overall, I'm afraid, bit of an elephant in the room, but I mean, I hope I can get some answers back on that. And coming back to broadband, which is my absolute pet hate, we live in Dorset, the county town. I have an absolute dreadful broadband in Poundbury, Old Poundbury. And you go into the town centre, you'd be lucky to pick up an email in a shop. So therefore, we've got to look at the bringing in the network. And this was mentioned again, Ben, in the report. I think it was 59% coverage overall in Dorset. It's pretty poor. But I mean, the fact is we should be getting these companies to actually invest in the structure to make sure that when we go forward, as we're trying to, we go forward on a positive foot to give the businesses exactly what they want and the communities and the people. Thank you.
Thank you. There's quite a few points for you to answer there.
Matthew Powers, I'll try and pick up the points if I can. So one of the things that probably members may or may not be aware is that the digital team are actually part of the economic development team. I just thought it'd be really helpful, and because exactly the points that you've raised we are concerned about, and we've got to look to make improvements for the future. Okay. The university's good point, well made, and we acknowledge that. And we are actually looking at that housing modelling as well as part of the university offer. So we are very lucky in Dorset that the towns that we have that universities are interested in provide the campus that they want for the people to come. So they're sustainable. We have destinations for students, beaches and the culture and the history. So we've got very many, so we are looking at that as part of the proposed business cases with the universities who have approached us. I think you're referring to Coma Homes on Portland. I know that colleagues previously have tried to engage with the company. We are engaging again. Councillor Hughes regularly mentions that to me. So again, we will be engaged. There's frustration. I think it's fair to say there's frustration in the local community. And Councillor Hughes is aware that we are trying to re-engage with Coma Homes to see if we can bring that to fruition. Thank you.
So just to add to Matt's response on that, I think a couple of things around. Firstly, you mentioned about the contribution potentially from businesses to housing and how we might be looking to support that. We're aware that a number of businesses already do that. They've been forced into a position where they've had to provide some form of accommodation to attract their workers in. They're not particularly happy about that, as you could imagine. Employment provision, employment development, employment growth is marginally viable for a lot of businesses. It's a significant investment in new plant, new manufacturing, new buildings and things like that. So there may well be viability challenges associated with levying additional costs onto those businesses in terms of providing housing accommodation. But we are aware that there are companies who are having to do that because they feel it's the only way they can attract staff in. And I think that leads me to the other point about housing affordability, and we're aware of that. And I think within the strategy, if you look at the kind of, I suppose, the council plan and the documents underneath it as a suite of documents, the housing strategy developed by our housing colleagues obviously looked at the provision of homes and the provision of affordable housing. What we're trying to do with this strategy is looking at how can we tackle it from an affordability point of view by trying to provide higher value, higher paid, higher skilled jobs to make people have the capability to afford the houses and reduce that ratio between house price affordability and the average wage.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I agree with you totally on that. But there's several things I look at, which we look at and say we always kind of like comment about but not notice. One of the biggest things to notice about the Dorset and other counties as well, including Cornwall and Devon, sorry, Councillor David Taylor, Chancellor Mary again, second homes, the bugbear of our state. Now, have we looked at the fact of enhancing or involving or engaging with people that actually have second homes to say to businesses or people who wanted to work in Dorset and live outside Dorset to the weekend, have we looked at the possibility of engaging second homes? Because we have thousands of things in Dorset. Absolutely. Businesses and empty properties. Dorchester, if you look on the high street, every business on the high street has empty property above it. Every one of them. And you think how many flats and accommodations are sat there empty throughout, not throughout our county town, but every single town. I was in Wimborne the other day, same thing. And I just kept looking around thinking, these are empty flats and empty properties. We've had a huge fire in Dorchester where the Gorge Cafe burnt down. Unfortunate, huge loss to our town, huge loss to our Christmas business because it was absolutely catastrophic. But the new build coming in is now coming in to say they're going to put the business in and then put accommodation above it. So there's enough avenue there looking down there which we could actually say we could go for it. And skills. In Dorset, we have a very highly skilled population. We do. People move here because it's a very beautiful area. I'm born and bred here. I know it. It's a great county to live in and come back to and be part of and work in. So the people who have high skills come here because they can afford to bring themselves down here to live. So are we tapping into them within our community, within our county, to actually looking at the workforce of the future? Because they're actually living here already, and the taxes come to us. Those are a couple of pointers. I just think they should be labelled on top of with the investigation. Thank you, Chair.
See, but Matt, you're nodding your head there, so do you want to say follow up other thing? Yeah. Does anybody else wish to add anything?
I think it's the point about the accommodation above retail premises. I think it's a good example of where we should be working with our planning colleagues about having supportive planning policies that enable that to happen.
I also think, the focus very much within the growth strategy is the next generation of skilled people. And that's why, the STEM is so important to get people to realise that there's real opportunities in Dorset and staying in Dorset and getting them interested in sort of engineering type things rather than going off just being in the hairdressers. Well, nothing wrong with that, but, if we're trying to get high skilled jobs, that's what we've got to focus on. Thank you.
So, Chair, if I may, can I give you a practical example of why that's so important? So, I had the pleasure of speaking to the Year 8 students at Budmouth Technical College recently. They are potentially the first generation that will be involved with green energy or other opportunities in Dorset. And listening to the ambition of the children of what opportunities there are, it changes your view of what we need to do as a council and listen to what they are saying and their views. The other thing that's really important is the opportunities Dorset Council can provide for children for their future employment. I think we underestimate sometimes what opportunities we can give people of the careers that they can have. So we are going to continue with that and the STEM issue and agenda, but actually I think sometimes Dorset Council needs to promote what we can provide as well.
Thank you very much for that. Very useful. Right. Who else? That's Northam, I think, was the next person I saw with a hand up.
Thank you. Councillor David Northam, Upway and Broadway ward in Weymouth. I'd first like to... I've got a number of comments. I have dropped an email through to the portfolio holder, the cabinet member, and others with details, but I'd like to just highlight the main points. The formation of the Task and Finish group was a really useful mechanism to both educate the new members and learn from some of the older members, but also to understand why we are doing what we're doing. And to me, it's been clear through a number of big bids into government and the repeat of where we get our funding from, that if Dorset isn't economically successful, and if it doesn't have high GVA, then it doesn't receive funding. When you look at the Levelling Up funding bid, it's all about GVA and the rest of it. So generating a higher GVA, that focus, I think, is really critical. we discussed in the Task and Finish group about, well, what about the people who aren't in employment? And they're two different things that they're obviously linkages, but they're addressing slightly different problems. And one of the things we identified was that there are already the chambers of commerce, the business improvement districts, and the local hoteliers associations that look after an awful lot of the smaller businesses in the area. And we, as a council, are choosing, I think, to focus on those higher value opportunities. So put the money, the little money that we have where it will do the most benefit. And I fully support that ambition that's portrayed in this plan. I'd like to make some specific comments. So one of the things I'd point out is we're going to be asking the government for money for coastal protection because we have a number of areas which are liable for flooding. That's big ticket money. And without having some economic growth taking place in Weymouth, we may not get it. And the same with roads. We're not going to get road investment unless we can demonstrate economic potential. So this is what it's underpinning, this whole strategy. I'm very impressed by the clean energy initiative which is coming forward. This would absolutely revitalise the Dorset economy. It'll have an immediate effect in Weymouth and Portland, but it will be much wider than just that. It's something which we must, I know, is being vigorously pursued, which is why certain people aren't here today with the UK REIF conference going on. But I worry that it's not something the government is going to agree to quickly. So it's a fairly long-term thing for it to start to really bear fruit. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but it means we must recognise that there's other things as well. So I put down we shouldn't put all our eggs in the one basket. But it's a really big basket and it could make a really big difference. So that's the main comment on that. I am the only councillor here today from Weymouth. So my next point is on the regeneration of Weymouth. This is critical for Weymouth. Weymouth has been too long, Weymouth and Portland have been for too long forgotten. And you know, there is the Levelling Up Fund money, which came for two reasons, the opportunities, but also the levels of deprivation in the area, which are mentioned in the report. I'm a little bit nervous that the write-up doesn't meet some of the things we talked about in terms of tourism, expanding, the write-up talks about expanding tourism, which is a necessary thing for delivering employment, but it's not going to deliver that high-value growth. And there's one line in there about local development orders. There needs to be more about tourism being important for Weymouth, but not solely. It already has I would estimate, a higher gross value added from the local defence and manufacturing engineering companies than the Winfrith cluster. So that's why I think we've got to not lose sight of that and continue to support those large companies which already exist in Weymouth, who can also bring some quite dramatic change. I'm nervous of the inclusion of the Winfrith site for higher education in engineering. Winfrith is a little isolated. It's 10 miles from Weymouth, and I think about the same from Dorchester. And whereas Weymouth, Portland and Chickerell has a combined population of 85,000. So I feel that the focus on higher education in engineering should potentially be based in Weymouth as part of the Weymouth College / University redevelopment that's in discussion. Potentially alongside the university course on health services or on health. I'm going to skip that one. You'll be pleased. Going on to the Innovation Park, I worry that the 300 new jobs at Winfrith that are in the strategy will not be achieved. When Winfrith was established in 2015, they set a target of 2,000 new jobs. That was repeated in 2017 when the Dorset Innovation Park was established. And in 2022, there was an FOI which revealed 807 jobs, with 550 from Atlas and 65 from Kinetic being the bulk of those jobs. Those companies already existed. They're not new jobs, they were old jobs. Atlas has expanded it. So there's only 192 new jobs, and some of those were actually the South Dorset MP's office and the party office. The 4 jobs there are included for that purpose. I'm not sure if they're still there. I'd also question whether we're spending enough resource in making economic growth happen. There's 1.65 million mentioned in the text in para 611 in the introduction to the paper, and it says it's going across digital place, tourism and economic development. I'd be interested to know what the split is between those 3 areas. And I'd go back to my first point that I think tourism is quite well catered for by the bids, by the local chambers of commerce, but we do need to provide some direction. I support the formation of the Dorset Growth Board, but again, worry that the details that are in there are very extensive, things that we're saying we're going to do. I'm not sure if we have the legs to do it. So I'd like some reassurance on that. I welcome the continuation of the EAP. And lastly, the supporting evidence lists a bunch of data, which is mostly averages for Dorset. I'm always nervous of averages. We actually had better information given to us in the Task and Finish group about where the high-value jobs existed and what the contribution was to the Dorset economy. Those ought to be in this strategy. Because that's why we're focusing on those, because that's where we'll make the difference. So, sorry, it's a bit of a thing. There was a couple of questions in there. Thank you.
Thank you. By all means, answer, yes.
I will try and pick out the questions in there if I may, Councillor. So, one thing I think it would be a really good idea is that we need to arrange actually a tour of the Innovation Park so that you can actually see the positive ways that it's gone forward. And it's not just now, it's all the good work that's been done in the past, because actually, if you don't see the improvement in facilities, the expansion of the businesses, and speak to some of the business leaders, you will then understand that actually they are looking to expand. And we are in discussion with 3 major employers of expansion on the park itself. And actually, from a cluster perspective of advanced manufacturing and military defence, they like working in the same space because they know that it's then a secure environment to actually breed innovation. So we will arrange that in the near future. We work very closely with our colleagues in planning and the portfolio member for planning. And as the Director of Planning, I'm ex-director, I'm sure Shane would agree with that we do look at how we bring together the local plan, neighbourhood plans, and actually how master plans for the prominent towns in Dorset actually fit together. And I think I just need to repeat that the whole of Place Directorate delivers economic growth. It's not just the economic development team. And actually, I'd go wider. I think the whole of Dorset Council actually supports economic growth. Children's services, education, everything that we do supports what we're trying to achieve together. So, although I can understand you focusing on what resource we have in it, I think we need to recognise that everything we do as a council supports the county as a whole. Thank you.
Anybody else want to answer any other points? No? Okay, well, the next on the list is Councillor Gibson. Sorry. Yes, go on.
Thank you. I note what you're saying about the expansion at Winfrith. I think there's also a lot of potential for expansion on the various industrial estates around Weymouth and Portland, and I'd certainly like to work with Councillor Bartlett on local development orders as part of a local plan for those areas. And I think it might be good to organise a similar visit to a cluster of the businesses on the Granby, because I think a lot of it's hidden away. I worked in submarine engineering for 20 plus years there, and most of the time I wasn't allowed to talk about what I did. And that's true of many of the businesses there. And I met a guy this week who's over from Seattle. He's a software expert. He's working with ASMPT, ASMPT, which is a world leader on printed circuit board manufacturing. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that really can boost the whole green energy as well. I'll leave the phrase swords into ploughshares. Thank you.
Can I just raise what the councillor just said? There's a really important bit in there. Lots of the successful firms in Dorset can't actually say what they do. And that's a real big frustration from our perspective of celebrating what they do. However, some of the firms are now expressing the interest to work together of showing people in Dorset the opportunities for the future for the next generation of the apprenticeships, the degree interns, etc. And actually, that's probably one of the most important things of how we promote these companies, not just in Weymouth, across the whole of Dorset, because they are across the whole of Dorset. And Councillor Northam is aware that we are spending a lot of time together speaking to these businesses of bringing them together so we have one business voice of how we can help connect them to the education providers, for grants and opportunities, and listening to their concerns about hotel accommodation, infrastructure, railway connections, and that's what we are here to do.
Thank you very much for that, yes. Okay, next is Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Simon Gibson, representing Verwood Ward and the Shadow Spokesman for the Economy. Before I start with my actual remarks, which is followed up by a few questions, I just want to come back, if I can, to some of the remarks made by Councillor Taylor around trying to get the bits, for example, housing right, alongside trying to attract inward investment. And this is really fundamentally important for me that we get this the right way around. We cannot expect businesses looking to invest into Dorset to solve all of our pre-existing social issues and still expect them to invest in our area. It's not reasonable to do so. And I know that that's not fully what you were saying, but the point here is quite a big one for the culture that we set for how we make decisions around businesses and the economy. We really need to crack on with solving our transport, solving our housing issues, solving our connectivity issues, to in turn attract businesses, not the other way around. So I'll just leave that point there. But what I do want to do is I want to start by talking about the bits of the strategy that I support and I think that our group support. Because there's lots in this strategy that is very agreeable. There's lots of stuff that when we were the administration, we were attempting to lay the foundations for, and I'm pleased to see in many cases that they're still there. So, for example, the clean jobs growth is fundamental. I'm delighted to say it. It's the right level of ambition. It's in an area that ticks a lot of the boxes that we all believe is important. So, good for the environment, good for skills, and should bring in and sustain long-term high-paid jobs. That is hugely welcome indeed. The attracting the large-scale inward investment has, as Matthew Piles said, a knock-on effect. Yes, it is clustered around one area, but there is a wider benefit to the supply chain. But I will come back to later on about where the limitations of that are in my perspective. Making the most of the innovation park, absolutely. The enterprise zone status there needs to be used as well as possible for as long as we have the ability to retain the business rates for, and then long-term create good jobs in Winfrith in an area that's important not just for Dorset but for the whole country's security. The renewed focus on skills, excellent. And I want to associate myself with what Matthew said about making sure that this is about the future generation having the right skills in the right industry, not necessarily importing people into Dorset, but making sure that people in Dorset have the right skills for the economy that we're growing. So all of that, from my perspective, is great, and I'm pleased to see it. I chuckled slightly to myself when Councillor Northam reminded us that he's the only Weymouth representative in the room today. So just fret not, Councillor Northam, Weymouth is very well represented in this document. Clean energy, Winfrith, Portland, Weymouth. Innovation Park, Winfrith. Levelling up and regeneration bid, Weymouth. The growth corridor, Weymouth to Dorchester. All good projects, as I've said, and I don't want to do any of them down, but if you're a councillor representing the vast other swathes of Dorset, you will look at this perspective and the document that we've been given to scrutinise today and say, well, what about us? Now, there's been some challenge to that assumption from Matthew Piles, who I hugely respect, and given that this is at an overview stage rather than at cabinet stage, a suggestion for the team what they might do to this report in the interim. If you're so sure that the economic benefits spread as far away, for example, as my ward in Verwood, which is over an hour away, and actually looks often more closely to Southampton for employment than it does to Weymouth, try and demonstrate that between now and this coming back to Cabinet. Show us in the north and in the east how you believe that that will play out. If it does, brilliant news. I would love to be able to explain to my residents that all of this good work in Weymouth and the Dorchester corridor will actually ultimately end up in better wages and a stronger economy in the east and in the north. So that's a challenge I'll leave with you, not for today, but to come back to when we see this at Cabinet. My worry is the rest of the county is dealt with in Target Measure 6. Councillor Wilson said some incredibly sensible things about that in his opening remarks. It has a sense, if it's not framed more correctly than it already is, of saying high-paid jobs and investment in the south and tourism and not much else apart from what you can cobble together elsewhere. I support Market Town strategy. It was me that asked for this to start. We are 18 months on from when I took this to overview last time, and there's no measurable improvement in it. I haven't seen a word about it since this. So whilst I support the theory, it is so theoretical at this point, it's hard to actually see what you mean by it. So again, if we could see some flesh in the bones for that, for when we come back to Cabinet, I know that would be appreciated. Because if all of the major progress on economic growth is to be in the south, this next bit is fundamental for the rest of us, because that's ultimately all we're being asked to put up with for the rest of it. There's lots more that we could do. If you live in a place like Gillingham, or a place like Verwood, where I represent, having market towns and tourism lumped together simply doesn't work. There's no tourism industry in Verwood. There won't be. It's a fairly new town. It doesn't have the depth of history that a place like, say, Dorchester or the likes would have instead. So please, there's a nuance there for those of us that don't live in old and touristy areas. Please don't lump the two of us in together here. There needs to be a distinction between the two, and we need to fully understand what this administration's ambition is for market towns outside of tourism. Tourism's fine, but I think it's overplayed in the strategy. The target measures, which I welcome, the portfolio holder makes great play. There's never been an action plan before, so I suppose it's good to see what in here. But the measure that says increase total visitor-related spend into Dorset by 5% by 2029, so important is that it's in the strategy 3 times. So I would say is that can't be the level of ambition for anything that's not Weymouth and Portland. So from my perspective, that's my comments on it. I've offered some suggestions for what can happen when we see this again at Cabinet. I hope some of those issues can be addressed by then. The only other sort of question that I've got really, I think I'll leave for now, but I might come back if the debate doesn't come onto it later. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I think there's some good comments and comments I would expect members to raise. I mean, I think that the fact is, you know, if Weymouth is the biggest town, and if Weymouth fails, you know, we all fail, and we've heard that before. You know, the travel to work area. I mean, I spent all my life working in Andover, Yeovilton, you know, Portsmouth, Plymouth. You know, people travel. You know, I'd much prefer to be within 20 miles, 30, you know, but to say, you know, expect to say that an hour's drive, 50 minutes is unacceptable. you know, I think people will travel if there's high-paid jobs, and it will trickle through, and there will be businesses supplying things that are used in the green energy cluster in North Dorset. And, you know, I'm sure of that. It will trickle through, just as, you know, Hinkley Point ripples out. The average travel to work there is 50 miles. You know, there's 12,000 contractors working on there at the moment. Unbelievable. It's a small town, isn't it? But that's benefiting people right across Somerset, you know, and further afield. And this is where the money's coming in, private money. You know, it's dictating that it is Weymouth and Portland. It just happens that we'd also had, and from your previous administration, a view to regenerate Weymouth. So it's all sort of coming together. But, you know, you are dictated with billions of pounds are potentially coming to Weymouth. You know, that's where you've got to try and facilitate that and ensure that the whole of Dorset, the trickle-down effect, you know, benefits everyone. And agree, you know, it's not just tourism. There's lots of small businesses and, you know, which are supported and can be supported and need to continue to be supported, you know, from this plan. So I take the points, but I make no excuses for that way of being mentioned so many times. Thank you.
And just to add to that, I think one of the ambitions we've put in there is the ambition for jobs, where we're looking at, I think I outlined a bit about the kind of the business engagement program that we look to run. And what we're looking at there is our best and our biggest, our highest number of higher employers, our high growth businesses. They can be located anywhere across the county, whether that's a rural area, a market town, Weymouth or whatever. So we would absolutely look to work with businesses in the east, the north, the south, the west of the county, wherever they might be, to help those businesses achieve the growth that they really need to achieve and to bring forward. So that as an ambition is county-wide.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much. I sort of did give the offer there to try and wait and come back to Cabinet to see what could be fleshed out, but I must admit, all my worries, it feels quite often that the concerns raised from those of us in the north are dismissed, and I must admit that felt quite dismissive from the portfolio holder there. So I'd ask him again politely, please, just to go away between 9 Cabinet and say, if you believe so strongly in what you say, please put it into the document. Please reassure those of us that represent in areas nowhere near Weymouth that you do actually understand the points we're raising here. I do understand the point. People will travel for work. My father travels absolutely all over the south for his job when he was setting up his business. But the point is here, we're being asked as representatives of the north to consider signing off a document that is basically presenting us with one choice: growth for the south. Growth for the south is good. No one here has said it's not. The point is why must it only be there? If economic growth is truly a priority for this council, there has to be opportunities in the north that we can also add into this document beyond those identified in the south. It's not a case of asking to choose between the north and the south. It's why is our ambition only limited to the south? So I wasn't going to ask it, but now I will. The document makes a point multiple times about trying to be more focused rather than an unfocused, as it was put in the report, approach in the past. That prioritisation that comes from a focused approach might be sensible, it might not. But it does also instinctively mean that there is a deprioritisation somewhere else in what's gone on before. Could the portfolio holder tell me, therefore, whilst taking a prioritised approach in the south, what, in his view, is being deprioritised from what's gone on in the past?
Well, I'm not sure what was prioritised in the past. There was no targets in the previous economic growth strategy, unbelievably. So as I said, the jam was spread too thinly. I mean, it's quite clearly what the objectives are within this plan. And as I say, you know, everywhere will benefit. Matthew's just pointed out that the Solent cluster, which will benefit areas in North as well. There's lots of things going on, lots of balls, which will benefit growth right across Dorset. And I don't recognise that North Dorset is not going to be supported in any way. You know, businesses will still get that ability to engage and get business support just as well, and we will look for that. But we've got to go where the big money is coming in.
Go on very quickly then.
I'll try a third time. I must admit, I struggled to hear most of that answer. Not having an action plan doesn't mean that the portfolio holder can be excused for not knowing what we did in the past. This is a plan that's been worked for before. Again, perhaps I'll just leave it and it can come back to me at Cabinet. What were we doing before that you're not intending to do in the future, given that your report quite clearly states you are now going to take a focused approach in some areas in comparison to an unfocused approach in the past? I think that's important because the public have a right to know what is now changing from what's gone on before. If the new approach is so laudable, tell us why the old approach didn't work, and therefore, bearing with the report mentions specifically that companies or businesses or areas got investment, but it didn't go towards our growth. That's a perfectly fair point. Just tell us what they are.
Councillor Biggs.
I think we would need to come back and give that some thought, but I'll just give you an example. You know, the Innovation Park is the only innovation park which was losing money. That needs to change, and that is changing with the approach that we're taking within this economic growth strategy. That's just one example. But clearly, if there are examples where you think there's expansion opportunities within North Dorset, we would love to hear that and work with them, you know, to deliver that. So I really don't quite understand the question, but there we go.
I think you've made your points, and I'm sure Councillor Biggs is going to go and listen and think about it. I'm sure he will. Councillor Jesperson was next.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Clarence Ward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a very interesting discussion this morning, hasn't it? And we've added a considerable amount of local nuance to this report. It's a pity, really, that it's already been put in the public domain before this overview committee had the opportunity to have this discussion. So I do hope that it is, as has been said, a living document, because I think one of the things that's clear from this morning is that there's a good deal, that while there's a lot of support for what is in this report, including support for the redevelopment of Weymouth, which is absolutely central, absolutely crucial, there's a lot that's not in this report and that we hope to see in the final version. And I would like to say a little more in support of what remarks have already been made about what's not in this report with regard to the North. And then I would like to raise some very specific questions, if I may, about the market town strategy, just so there will be questions coming later. Our ambitions surely should be to help all of our businesses to grow, not exclusively those that have been handpicked, as it were, as Councillor Vitali points out, for their opportunities for growth and productivity gains. The businesses in and around our market towns and across our rural areas, they are the engine of the Dorset economy. They employ people now. They are, some of them are thriving, some of them are struggling. They are employing people in the rural areas where 46% of our residents live. I'm talking, Mr. Chairman, about businesses such as the Blackmore Vale Dairy in Shaftesbury, Neil's Yard in Milton, Dexter Lighting in Gillingham, Hunt's Food over in Sherborne, Rose Engineering in Sturminster Newton, Hall and Woodhouse in Blandford, and I've gone through food production, food delivery, manufacturing, so there's a whole range of business. These are not low-skilled businesses. These are not low-paid jobs. These are really important businesses that are the driving force, the engine room of the Dorset economy, and have been. As I say, not as glamorous as the high-tech sector that we're rightly focusing on. We know what these businesses need because they have told us for a long time, and surely what those businesses need should be more central to our economic strategy. Otherwise, this is little more, I have to say, than a prospectus. You variously call it a prospectus, a growth strategy, and a plan. Well, it's certainly a prospectus, and a very good one, if it's a document to get people to come and invest in the south of Dorset. A growth strategy, well, it's a growth strategy for those parts of the economy that are mentioned in it. It's not a plan, I would suggest, but it's not a growth strategy for anywhere outside of the south of the county, in all honesty, is it? Those businesses that are already existing all across the north, they've told us what they need. They've told us what they want, an upskilled workforce. Well, we've talked about the new university provision. We've talked about upskilling. But there's no provision in here, and I have heard no provision before to explore the possibility of putting some kind of technical training in the northern part of the county. You know, if you wanted to get to Weymouth College by 8:15 in the morning, you're going to have to leave Gillingham at 9:15 the night before. So, you know, by public transport. I know people can drive, but these are people who are needing to be upskilled, probably don't have cars. So there's no provision for training in the north of the county. The local plan, the local transport plan does not address the question of public transport in rural areas, and this is absolutely fundamental. How are people to get to work and to get to these training places? It's all very well to talk about the BSIP bid. The BSIP bid gave us in the north, all that the north got from the BSIP bid was 2 Saturday buses. That's not going to get anybody from my villages. 2 Saturday buses from Gillingham to Shaftesbury. Saturday buses, not workday buses to get you to work. So the BSIP bids have not provided any public transport at all in the north. So I really would hope that you would put public transport in the north way more central to this report. Now, employment land, which is really important and will come forward from the local plan, but that's only any good to anybody if it's got mobile phone connectivity and electricity. And we heard some while ago at the beginning of this debate about the engineering firm that has to run a tractor to keep its production process going. So what are we going to do about making sure that the business land that we have in the north is usable, is fit for purpose? So we need to focus on these real identified needs by the real businesses that are already there across our market towns and in the north, employing people in good jobs on which drive our economy. So none of all of that, Mr. Chairman, is what is missing from this report, if I may say. Now, there are levers available to the council to give immediate support to these businesses, and some of those were detailed in my colleague 10-point plan, which came forward last week. And so we would like to see some of that woven into this report. So that's my general remarks about what's missing from this report. I know that you want to focus, I get that, and I know that you need to focus on the high-tech parts of the economy that will bring in well-paid jobs. I'm not challenging that at all, 100% behind that. But we cannot do that at the expense of that part of the economy that is already there, already working, and needs the support from Dorset Council. We cannot make this either or. We have to support the existing economy that is employing people all across the north. If I could move on then, after that slightly impassioned plea, to a few of my detailed questions about the policy for our market towns. First of all, the point has already been made that we need to uncouple, if we can, the tourism policy, which is fine, with the market towns. They're two quite separate things. Increasing tourism is excellent, but most of our market towns are not tourist hotspots. They're just ordinary working towns. And I would associate myself with the points made by Councillor Wilson in that area. So can we uncouple those two things? Please do not say to our market towns all across the north and the east, it's about tourism. It really isn't. That they wouldn't recognise themselves characterised in that way. My next point then, we comment that in this report that 70% of the town councils are to produce a master plan. That immediately begs the question, Mr. Chairman, what about the other 30% of our towns? Are they not to get a master plan? Are we abandoning them? That's an awful lot of residents that we're turning our back on. But these master plans, are they the same as the master plans that will be coming forward in the Dorset local plan? Because I'm assuming that's what they are. In which case, has anyone asked Gillingham how their really excellent community-led 2026 master plan worked out for their local businesses? Because it's a salutary lesson how not to rely on the local plan's master plan to deliver economic growth. So if by the master plans you mean the master plans in the local plan, then I would be very interested to hear how you think they're going to drive economic growth, because our experience in the north is that they don't. And then what about the remaining towns that are not getting a master plan? So I would like some information about that. We also would like to know about what you're going to do with the bringing training into the north to feed from those market towns, and what you're going to do about local transport. But particularly my question on the master plans, I'd like an answer to. Thank you.
I will try and pick up the first part of the questions, and then hopefully the colleagues will help. So I think we've said a number of occasions this is about all Dorset businesses being celebrated across the county, not in one particular area. And you're right, we have fantastic businesses across the whole of Dorset. If I say north, south, east and west, I'll probably make sure I don't get everybody. So point noted and agreed. We're also working very closely with the Dorset Chamber of Trade as well, and that's quite an important point. It's not just Dorset Council that engages with the business communities across Dorset. And I think we've got to work closer with them for the future. Sometimes there is a concern about too much focused in the east from a business community. Unfounded. It's about the whole of Dorset. So we are working with. We're actually talking to providers across the whole of Dorset for education, and you're correct. There is provision at Yeovil, there is provision in Bournemouth and Poole, there's provision in the south of Dorset. But that's not just for the higher education and further education, that's the schools as well. So I am in close discussions with colleagues in Children's Services, and that's important, very important for the future for everybody in here. I think also things like the Dorset Mentoring Scheme for businesses is very important to mention as well. I'm sure colleagues can do that. Just one point, local transport plan. I think it's fair to say the whole of Dorset didn't get what they wanted for public transport. However, the reality is commercial services are where people are, bums on seats. And that's why I am envious of BCP, of the bus services they have, but they are commercially viable. We will continue to lobby. There's a huge amount of work done by the previous portfolio holder, which the current portfolio is now taking forward. But the question is for us is, government promised a seat at the table for rural connectivity on transport, and they never came back to us on that, and that's something we need to take on board. I think there's a general consensus about uncoupling the policies between tourism and the market towns, and noted, and thank you. But also, that digital connectivity is a priority for all of us across the whole of Dorset. But it's not just the digital connectivity, it's about utilities as well. It's all of the utilities, because there's a real concern that the utility companies have not invested enough of where we live. And there are live traffic works across Dorset that are painful for the economic growth of Dorset at the moment, because if we don't have the utilities, we cannot grow. I'll probably leave it for there. Nick may want to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So just to respond, I guess, on a couple of points. First about the point of businesses and those businesses that you mentioned, particularly in the market towns. And I probably want to go into a bit of detail about how we might actually tackle that. So what we're envisaging with our business engagement strategy underneath the ambition for jobs would be that we look to have, in effect, case officers who deal with, on a one-to-one basis, those large business or those high-growth businesses. So people like Dextra, Neil's Yard, Ultra Energy, all of those kind of higher growth, large-scale employers that are important for those market towns. They have a single point of contact within the Economic Growth Service who they have a strategic long-term relationship with, that can feed in then views of senior management, cabinet member. We have that beginning, have that kind of connection. So absolutely take the point of those businesses, because they're quite often large employers, they're fundamental to the economies of those market towns, and actually having that long-term strategic point of contact, one-to-one relationship with, so we can deal with their concerns and we can listen to their points of view. That's absolutely fundamental to how we deal with that ongoing business engagement. Coming back to the point about market towns and the market towns master plan, I absolutely agree with Councillor Gibson. This is an initiative he kicked off when he was a cabinet member. It's something that has been on the agenda for a number of months. The time period that we've taken to get this off the ground has probably been much longer than we either anticipated or would want, but it's something that we have got within the plan and ambition again to take forward. It is a differentiation between the kind of the formal planning policy framework. So it's effectively a community-led master plan which identifies where there may be opportunities for growth or regeneration. It's not a formal allocation process of land or planning policy. It's more about what the community's wants and aspirations are, building on their local strengths. So it would absolutely have to be dealt with or developed in conjunction with local communities, in fact led by those, which is why there's a framework approach that we would take. And you mentioned about the other 30% of towns and what about them. I think our ambition would be, obviously over the fullness of time, that all towns develop this approach and have that community approach. But because I say it would be developed in conjunction with communities, it would be up to them to take it forward, and we'll be there in a supporting facilitating role to help them achieve that.
Thank you very much. Very helpful answer. Specifically on the master plans, if we're talking then about the master plan, which I think they piloted in Bridport, which we did hear a presentation about in the overview committee some while ago, and it is notable, and it's probably relevant that there has been very little movement on that front, because it probably is because it proves it's on the too difficult pile, because we're leaving that to the town councils to, as it were, pick that up and run with it. I would, if that's the route we're going to go for regenerating our market towns, then I do think we need to acknowledge that Dorset Council will need to put some more resource into that. Just leaving that to our town councils might prove more onerous, which leads me on nicely to the final point I would want to make, which kind of emerges from all of this discussion that we've got here, that these ambitions are excellent and absolutely crucial, that we should grow our economy. We probably need to think very hard about the resource that Dorset Council here at County Hall is able to put into because we're talking about one-to-one support for businesses. We're talking about support for important businesses in our market towns. We're talking about a regeneration strategy for our town centres. We're talking about all these really important, significant bids. Now, I know Weymouth has the most excellent resource in Matthew Piles, but you know, we really do need to think very carefully about how much resource Dorset Council is able and is willing to put into this whole economy project, if I can call it that. I know we don't have enough money, Mr. Chairman. We don't have enough money to do anything, but we do make choices about what we choose to prioritise. And it seems to me that if we're choosing to prioritise growing the economy, which obviously everyone in this room would think is a good idea, then we might have to choose to put some more of our resource behind that. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, I think we take your point, and I think it's a measure of how many of the Cabinet have come and spent the morning with us today. It shows that it is their priority as well. Matt.
I have to be careful how I word this, but thank you for your kind words. I think it's rather important that, you know, I'm a director for economic growth for the whole of Dorset. And Councillor Biggers is aware, is one of the things that I'm working with Nick and my executive director is actually what resource we have within economic development and refocus it to the ambition and priorities that we've set out today. And it's important that we do that, but also recognise exactly all the points that members have said today in this discussion. So we will come back with some further information for you. Thank you.
Councillor Tarr.
I found today really fascinating all the proposals being made, and I hope they're taken notice of. I think the officers have given very good answers. We all feel left out. I feel left out because I have a rural ward, and I also travel around rural Dorset extensively, all corners of it, and into Somerset and Wiltshire and Hampshire. But the rural economy has got very serious problems. And when you talk about landowners and farmers, it may be true that they don't have a massive input to the economy. In fact, they make a loss because they're subsidised by the government very often. But they are struggling. They're having to change quite rapidly at the moment, so they're not quite sure which direction everything's going in. They also suffer from the Poole Harbour prohibition thing, the people who used to do the 1 month camping, which just about got them over the barrier to pay the next month's bills and the winter bills. That's been seriously questioned and is in turmoil. And they're very upset about that. Landowners and farmers have the majority of the county in their control, and there are all sorts of things we want to do on that land, build roads or footpaths or bridleways, whatever, or people to use them, where we need their help and cooperation. And my job on the Dorset Heritage Coast, now the Jurassic Coast, was to cooperate with farmers and landowners all along the coast. And lots of people from inland came to see me from tourist operations, like some of our old stately homes and castles and other tourist attractions, and the pubs, and said, why can't we get some visitors up here? Now, rural tourism, active travel, is very important. When a person hires a house and drives down here and rents it for a fortnight, they order the food from Tesco's. That's a multinational. They pay the house owner, who probably lives somewhere completely different. That money goes straight out of the county. They buy their petrol from an international firm. That goes straight to... We make no money at all from those people. When somebody's walking or cycling, active travel, staying in the countryside or walking the coast path, they have to bring everything they need with them, which will be in a backpack or in some cycle panniers. Everything else has to be bought in the county. So their overnight stay at the pub, they will have to go out for the meal, they have to have the breakfast, they have to go to another pub for lunch somewhere along the route of the coast path or one of our long-distance cycling routes. Every penny they spend comes into the county to local, rural, mainly rural people. Tourism, the Weymouth tourism, where you've got 12 weeks of the year where people sit on beaches, is very problematic. But the all-year-round tourism, people come cycling here, they go walking on the coast path. I write the guidebooks for it, I meet them. It's busy at Christmas, it's busy all year round. People come here all year round for these activities. And activity is the name of the game at the moment, especially for older people who've got the time to spend. So we need to be aware of that opportunity. And I feel, along with Ben, who mentioned Swanage and Purbeck, that it's not just Purbeck, it's the areas like Milton Abbey and that north corner of Dorset and back behind Lyme Regis and so forth. They desperately need a policy which will carry them through, and a tourism policy which recognises the value of active travel and rural tourism. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you for those points. I mean, I would say, the viability of existing businesses is very much, is really important. And I think there's plenty of the business as usual services like the mentoring, which are in place to support those. But again, it comes back to those being more productive. If businesses can be more productive, their chances of survival and expansion, are going to be really helped. So if they can reduce their inputs, their energy costs by being more energy efficient, upskilling the labour force to be more efficient, that's all going to help them. So that is within there as far as we're trying to be more productive. But I think, this is an economic growth strategy. That's why it's focused so much on those businesses that are going to really provide the future expansion. But yes, of course, we don't want to forget those existing and cherished businesses that are in Dorset. And I don't think we're doing that. It's just, we're talking about economic growth strategy. Within, the walking, cycling, all the rest of those active travel events, that is something that is known to be a growth area. and can bring in some, well-paid money. And it's something that I know the Dorset Tourism Partnership look at, and we're cognizant of. But I think, again, it is still relatively small part of the economy, an important part. But that's why, perhaps it doesn't shout from within these pages, because, there's so many bits we could talk about in the economy, isn't it? And we told Mr. Councillor Mercer, trying to keep these things a bit more concise. We could have made this 3 times as long, I'm sure, and put it in, very much like the LEP ones, which went run into hundreds of pages, full of data and etc., covering the whole thing. But we're trying to be reasonably short, concise, and snappy within it. But I do recognise those points and the value of active travel. Thank you.
And just to follow on to that, to give a bit of a specific example of what our tourism service are doing, notwithstanding the points about the importance of the tourism sector and the value of it and the contribution to its the overall economy. But we are looking at where are our key growth sectors within tourism. So there's segmentation. You can separate out your visitors, in terms of where they come from, their demographic profile, their wants, their needs, their interests. We've got that information. It's something we're having a look at, and that enables us to be a bit more specific and targeted in terms of some of our promotional campaigns. So if there are growth opportunities around sustainable travel and sustainable walking, there will be groups of people who would fall into that kind of category where that type of activity might interest them. And so we can look to attract them and target them with specific campaigns or accommodation or food or drink offers, whatever. So there is that ability for us to look at some of that diversification of the tourism economy as well.
Okay, right. We are getting way beyond our time allocation because this is only one. Hold on, this is only one item of 3 that we're discussing today. I'm not going to stop anyone from speaking or anything like that, but I'm just letting you know we are way over time. So please do make your comments as concisely as you can do, and don't repeat things that people have already said before. Councillor Brown's next.
Thank you, Chair. In that spirit, I will solely comment that let me introduce myself first, as is required. Apologies. My name is Piers Brown. I represent the fantastic and beautiful ward of Cranbourne Chase. I am also a small business owner here in Dorset. We employ 7 fantastic people and fall very, very clearly into not just the SME category, but the MSE category. I wanted to ask a specific question about the LEP, and its replacement, the Dorset Growth Board, which has sort of been touched on. So the first thing I want to do is make a plea in terms of the membership there, to just think a little bit more outside the box, rather than just sort of looking at the Chamber of Commerce and then the Federation of Small Businesses representation. Actually, how do we get actual small and micro businesses on that board? The challenge you're going to have there is those people are out there working hard, because if they don't make £1 today, they're not getting paid on Friday. So obviously it's difficult for them to give up too much time compared to a big multinational. One of the things I highlighted in the document was the statistic that 90% of our companies are micro or small MSEs. And I was a little concerned, I guess, for the idea that all the resources are going to be focused on these 1% of big fish, and the sort of suggestion that there'll be some web resources for the other sort of 99% of businesses. So my concern with what I guess we could sort of describe as trickle-down economic development, and I agree that if we bring in, fantastic big business and opportunities like sort of outlined in here, that it has a supply chain impact, I think is simplifying the challenges that business have to a lack of opportunities for growth. That is part of the problem. The other half is overcoming hurdles that stand in their way of doing so. And my business is a B2B business. I spend my entire day talking to other businesses, and the first thing you're taught in sales is always talk to people about what they're interested in, and for business owners, that is their business. So the 6 things that businesses raise with me that relate to Dorset Council's sphere of influence are getting connections, bigger connections to the energy grid. Councillor Jesperson referenced a company that runs a tractor to provide additional electrical power for their business. I'm aware of one that runs a diesel generator despite having planning permission to put a solar array on their unit. The cost of electricity, there's a North Dorset business whose energy bills have gone from in the tens of thousands to the hundreds of thousands over the last couple of years with the shock in energy. Housing costs for staff. The relationship employers have with their employees has changed over the last few years. Employees are demanding more from their employers in terms of work satisfaction, in terms of a work-life balance, in terms of, I guess, a sense of purpose, which is a fantastic thing, but that provides challenges, particularly if they can't afford to be housed locally. We've touched on that, but that is an area which falls within Dorset Council's sphere of influence. A thing we haven't spoken about is the soft skills that our school leavers have in Dorset, not necessarily lining up with the soft skill requirement of our employers. There's a business in Gillingham that has a programme for educating those soft skills to school leavers that come and start working for them as their first job, because we're not lining up not just the hard skills and qualifications, but the soft skill requirements as well. A big one is the cost and the speed of gaining planning permission. That is entirely within our gift. If a business is looking to expand, it has additional opportunities lined up, it has staffing resources, it has a supply chain lined up, it has the builders lined up. If there is an indefinite timeline on how long it's going to take to get planning, the whole lot falls away. And then the big one is sort of units for them to expand into. So, you know, I won't share the business name because I don't have their permission. They have a very successful business in Shaftesbury, and they've just had to open their next location in Henstridge because they couldn't expand on their current site, despite within the last few years Dorset Council approving a national house builder to build on the allocated land for industrial units in the town. So what is the point that I'm trying to get at is I think we need to start focusing on the things we can make a difference on today, and I think that's how we can help the other 99% of businesses, because if we put all of our eggs into the basket for the 1%, everyone is fighting over the big fish. And if someone comes up with a better offer, unless we can really lock those businesses in by having a really specific set of really high-paying, high-skilled, high-technical qualifications and in our workforce that can't be replicated somewhere else, and the pure fact that we're trying to build that would suggest that it can be, we can look to afford to lose those. And we all know what happens when communities lose sort of a big employer. The future of development, the future of small businesses, you know, we are a nation of entrepreneurs and shopkeepers after all, I think actually is in our SMEs. So I really would encourage you to go away and think about actually how are we going to cultivate that acorn that turns into an oak tree, because no one knows where the next James Dyson or Richard Branson is coming from, and hopefully it will be in Dorset. So I'll just leave you with a slight challenge to some of the phraseology that was used a little earlier, that the growth potential comes from big business and jobs growth comes from there. I'm not sure if that argument was considered that much when Richard Branson walked into his aunt's house and asked her to remortgage the house so he could try for the second time doing Virgin Records. Now, I'm not suggesting that we remortgage the council, but I do suggest maybe we're a little bit more like Richard Branson's aunt, because I doubt she's regretting that investment now. So between now and Cabinet, I'd really like to see a much clearer, defined set of things that the Dorset Council can do to get out of the way of business and actually get behind them. So I would also like to ask you to consider that there is a phone number that a small business can call up and say, I don't have technical planning skill. I'm trying to, for example, are you aware you have to get planning permission in an AONB, natural landscape, to change from a slidey barn door to a rolly barn door? Come on, guys. You know, that is actually something that within the national planning legislation we can provide permitted development rights for. So actually, how can we just answer that question really simply to help a small business overcome that hurdle really quickly?
So thank you for the questions, and I understand where you're coming from. Could I just pick up a couple of points? The Planning Authority has, for a number of years, offered pre-application advice for all the businesses in Dorset, which has been successful. Councillor Bartlett is aware that one of my past roles was actually talking to businesses about helping them through the planning system. And you are aware that most of our planning policies are national planning policies, and it is extremely frustrating for small businesses in Dorset when they come up against issues that you've raised. So my ask for members is point them towards pre-application planning advice. It works. It's really useful, and the planning case officers are there to help development. I'm sure Councillor Bartlett may want to say a bit more on that, but I just thought I'd raise that. Also, your soft skills point is a hugely important point for our future generations. We are actually offering to help at the moment with some of the schools in Dorset, and that sort of links to a conversation we will have with colleagues in Children's Services about future provision. We're not there yet, but we want to get there because you're right, giving people those skills. It's probably all on for that, but thank you for those points.
If I may come in on some of the terminology used around the businesses, and I probably will have to apologise for this if it came across that way, either in the document or any of my answers today. We absolutely don't see high growth businesses being those larger companies already. It could be anybody at any size that could have an idea. We're looking at putting out a kind of an entrepreneurship program, business startup program for younger people, hopefully to help generate those kind of those innovation, those skills. We'd work with micro enterprises. If they demonstrated high growth potential, we would be looking to have a kind of a focused conversation with them. So just want to reassure members that there isn't just that focus on the larger businesses. Yes, they're absolutely important, but we'd also obviously focus on whatever size business it is if they can demonstrate high growth potential.
Thank you very much. Councillor Val Pothecary from Gillingham, the frozen north, that we've all heard how neglected we feel, and you better believe it, because we in Gillingham do feel totally neglected. It's not new, it's always been like that, but when I read a document like we've been discussing, I think nothing's changed. We all work together, I think, across the chamber really well. There's huge respect across the chamber for our colleagues' and knowledge and experience. But I was really fed up when I read this. I understand the need to look after Weymouth and Portland. Of course I do, but it shouldn't be at the exclusion of towns like mine. So looking at my scribble here, we've got the first 11 pages of this brochure talk about, we've got the Dorset Green Energy Map, the Dorset Innovation Park, Ambitious for Innovation, which is entirely focused on South Dorset, and Ambitious for Regeneration, which is entirely focused on Weymouth and Portland. So that's the first 11 pages gone. And I take what you've said here, significant potential to capitalise on the spirit of entrepreneurship that exists across the county. We will provide people looking to start their life in business with the resources and head start that makes their journey less difficult. Bringing together dedicated expertise, funding and access to programmes such as Doormen, we will increase the number of new business startups and give them the best possible chance of success. I have to say, it looks like a revamped Business Link. And I'm saying that because I worked for Business Link for almost 20 years. We had a programme for the big companies. We had a group of business advisors for them. I looked after SMEs, actually. Rural Dorset, I ran 6 rural Dorset business clubs in the evening for SMEs, proper businesses, and I'm going to probably offend people now. No financial services, no banks, people that were hands-on running their own businesses. And I personally mentored them, apart from managing the mentoring team, which became Doormen, actually. So, and I didn't need to say all that really, because nobody's very interested, but it gives me a basis for having the opinions that I've got. And so what I want to know is, you know, I've always had much regard for the importance of market research. And I would ask how many businesses you've consulted and what were the findings. I was unable to find information in the appendices. And I know you've done road shows. So what did they tell you? One question there. Lots of the questions I was going to ask have been asked by my colleagues and received very good answers, actually. So we're going on here then. We move on to ambitious for university and skills. As far as I'm concerned, pay is related to qualifications, which can only be attained in higher education. We all know there's a skills shortage in Dorset. That always has been, in my knowledge, always. And the higher tech the company, the bigger the skills shortage, if you see what I mean. So I agree about this ambitious for university and skills, and I'm very ambitious in this regard. But what opportunities are outlined in the north of the county? Gillingham students are unable to travel to Bournemouth or Weymouth. We've discussed this already, for higher education on a daily basis, as they can't get there and back in the same day. Many students are not ready to leave home and move to access STEM subjects. They can travel out of county to Salisbury or Yeovil College by train. But where is the ambition to offer university or skills to the many students in Gillingham? We've got a fabulous senior school in Gillingham, which people move to Gillingham to get their kids into this exemplary school. And then where do we send them? There's nothing. Everything available to them is south. Bournemouth Pool, Weymouth, nothing is set up to look after Gillingham's excellent students. And when I was chair of this council, I formed a very good working relationship with Yeovil College, and I've seen that over the years really, really improve. And they are now working closely with the University of Gloucester. But, you know, what we need, to be fair, for Gillingham, the fastest growing town in the southwest of England, we need and deserve a technical college offering information technology, robotics, etc., all the high-income stuff that our kids can see a plan for the life ahead. If they can just get a place at this college, they could go on. We could retain their skills in this county. We would encourage businesses that really, high-tech businesses that need to come because they would see there's a ready market for skills here. So that ticks so many boxes. It's a no-brainer. And in Gillingham or in the sort of north, we've got plenty of space, plenty of will. The local people, the town councils would be really thrilled if something was planned to look after our kids there, so that they didn't have to wait until they'd made their money and had a couple of kids before coming back to lovely Gillingham because it's safe for their children. This is the gap that we lose them from. Anyway, where am I now? I understand that the LEP funding is now being sent to us. And I'd like to know who's going to sit on the new growth board, actually. I remember, just as an aside, when the LEP was being planned, and they'd consulted my business clubs to see whether we really needed a LEP. I should say no more. Anyway, so huge disappointment regarding the imbalance of north to south, huge. And to be fair, you know, our residents pay the same rates. There's absolutely no excuse to treat them so shoddily, actually, on opportunities for their offspring. And we know, don't we, that good local businesses create wealth in the locality. And that gives the town a buzz. That gives everybody a buzz, a feeling of well-being, which, you know, we're hoping to achieve that ourselves as a council. But wouldn't it be nice if that trickled down to our towns and residences? So I need to know the reassurance that we actually know our businesses and have listened to their needs. What is the retained business rate being spent on? And is there any chance that we can support our market towns by reducing their business and their high street business rates? I mean, seriously, I've had people turning up at my door sobbing. They're going to have to close the business. Quadrupled their business rates. And how do you find that money? How do you find it? So, and a word of warning, just a little word of warning. I have seen over the years millions of pounds being spent on trying to identify entrepreneurs. You know, it's sexy, isn't it? If we can just wheedle them out, you know, if we can just find the right ones. And it costs a fortune. And, you know, you can't pick those winners. You just can't. There's entrepreneurs that are very obvious, that go bust several times before they become successful. And then there's the people that just want to start a business that you wouldn't really call an entrepreneur. But my goodness, they're the businesses that you want. And we really need to support them from pre-start. Have you got a business plan that stacks up? And if you haven't, save yourself the indignity of losing your home to the bank. So that's the start. You can see what sort of business advisor I was, can't you? And so if we can just hold their hand a bit, and then they know who to contact, but if they need a bit of help, any sort of help, information, just a bit of support for the confidence that we can give them. This whole idea, I really welcome what we're trying to do here, and it's been a long time coming, and I really welcome it. But please don't spend a fortune on entrepreneurs that you'll be so disappointed. And what used to happen in Business Link days is that the bar just got lowered and lowered and lowered so that we had decent figures to report on. Put it this way, if they had to pay VAT after 18 months, then they were entrepreneurs. Well, that's rubbish, isn't it? So I'm just sorry, that's a word of warning to not waste our money on that. And I'm sorry I've gone on, but thank you.
That's quite all right. Who want to comment?
Yes. First of all, a word of thanks, because if you set up or help set up the Doormen Business Mentoring Programme, then you set up a really fantastic entity that has been really valuable for a whole number of our businesses. It's still ongoing. It's probably one of the longest, if not the longest, running mentoring programs within the country. It helps support a large number of our businesses. So my personal thanks for that. I take the point about Business Link. We've obviously had various different iterations of business support since the Business Link days. We've had the LEPs. The LEPs have been a part of that environment. We're absolutely looking to help our businesses have that wider kind of business engagement. We're not trying to find that kind of next golden nugget of an entrepreneur. What we are trying to do is have a support program in place to help our small businesses. And if we can encourage people to start themselves and setting up in business, whatever that business might be, then that's another person who's starting on that kind of career ladder, who is taking that decision-making process, learning things through that, whether they succeed or not. And maybe they will be the next person who goes on to employ 5, 10, 15, 100 people. So I'd respond on that. I think the point you made about higher education or further education provision in North Dorset, a number of members have raised that today. And it's quite clearly something that we perhaps need to have a look at, to take away, have a conversation with perhaps our skills providers, see whether or not there's any viability around this, maybe work with our partners, particularly in Somerset and Wiltshire, about that kind of cross-border provision, and see whether there is some kind of project that we could get off the ground here. So if members would permit us to perhaps look at that, as maybe it wouldn't be in this iteration of the plan, but it's, as we've said before, this is a living document, we can add things into it. So we'll have to think about how we can incorporate that within the wording of the strategy, but it is something I think we've just discussed, and we will look to take away and work on. Okay.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. I'd just like to some extent echo what Councillor Tarr was saying about tourism and it providing things to do for people who are not just coming here to go to the beach in the summer. But ecotourism, I think, is the way forward. And I think although there's quite a lot in this, I noticed you say that there's significant potential to grow the length of tourist season and increase the average visitor spend. And the way to do that is ecotourism, because I myself have been interested in bird watching for a long time, for many years. And I can tell you that if you ask anyone who's interested in bird watching up and down the country, they've all heard of Poole Harbour, thanks largely to the fantastic publicity the BBC have been giving it for a few years, and also the fantastic work that the Birds of Poole Harbour charity have been doing with reintroducing ospreys, etc. So it's very well known. When I go over the Purbex, always bumping into people that are there for the bird watching. And the great thing about bird watching, or any ecotourism, is it spreads the load. They're not here for the sun and the beach, they're here for the migration seasons in the autumn and the winter. So it's very, very big call for many people. I know it's not supporting many sort of sexy, high-tech jobs, but it is selling something we already have, so we don't need to invest really. It's there. All we've got to do is tell people about it. And I know the Birds of Poole Harbour have told me that the BCP Council have praised them a lot because of the amount of extra tourists they're bringing in to BCP. The unfortunate thing is, of course, that they run a lot of boat trips which go from Portkey. I don't know if there's any scope for doing any from Wareham or something like that, but most of Poole Harbour is in Dorset Council. So we ought to be promoting it more, I think. And that's a win-win, or it's a door that's ajar, just push it. Okay, thank you very much.
Matt.
So I can report some good news on that exactly, because I'm dealing with what they call the senior sites manager for all of the Dorset reserves. There are a number of reserves in Dorset that are nationally acclaimed for visitor attractors, and you're absolutely right. So we're trying to work with the RSPB to promote that throughout the year.
Right. Well, I think the length of this debate today shows exactly how important this subject is to so many councillors and to so many of us who work for the council as well. Clearly, there's a huge range of things to discuss. I'm sure we could be here for another few hours if we really wanted to, but I don't propose to carry on any longer. Everybody here has spoken at least once now. Several people have spoken twice or more. I think the points have been made are very heartfelt by those people. I'm sure our team and our portfolio holder will give a lot of thought to everything he's heard about this afternoon, and I'm sure some of it will at least will be reflected in the next stage when it goes to Cabinet. So thank you all very much. We are actually also trialling a situation where we have breaks when meetings are very long, because sometimes I know people need to have a chance to think about things before they go on to the next subject. So what I propose is that we have a little break now and start again at 10 to 1. It gives enough time to go and get anything you need to. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back for part 2 of our extended committee meeting today. We're going to go back to... Oh, sorry. Firstly, we need to extend the meeting, and there's a proposer here. It's just that we carry on beyond 1 o'clock, which is otherwise... So, Councillor Jesperson, Councillor Taylor, seconded. All those in favour of extending the meeting? Yes, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Back then to the main part of the agenda, item 7, consultation report on antisocial behaviour. Mr. Graham Duggan first.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. A couple of apologies first. Firstly, from Councillor Jill Taylor, who was here by Teams for the meeting but had to leave for a personal appointment. And secondly, the report author of this afternoon's report on ASB-related public spaces protection orders, John Newcombe, he can't be with us today, so I'm covering. And because of that, I have put together just a very few brief slides, mainly to make sure that I stick to track in this, what I find, quite complex area. There's certainly quite a lot of appendices to the report, which I apologise for, but it is necessary information. I will try and take us through the key points of the report this afternoon. So public spaces protection orders are used to control, reduce unwanted behaviours where more suitable legislation doesn't exist. So probably members will know them more from controls on dog owners, about dog fouling and keeping dogs on leads in certain places. We also have other types of behaviours which tend to be classed as antisocial behaviour. And public space protection orders can be used to designate certain geographical areas to control those behaviours. The legislation has a set of criteria, and it's quite strict in terms of what can be included in a PSPO. So you can see the criteria on the screen there. And it really does have to be a type of behaviour that can't be easily controlled by another piece of legislation or another way of enforcement or awareness. So in 2022, both this committee at the time and then Cabinet made public spaces protection orders for antisocial behaviour in the geographical areas that are listed on the slide there. So orders were established in Weymouth, Dorchester, Lyme Regis, Portland, West Bay and Bridport, as well as a couple of more general orders. And part of today's report, and indeed one of the recommendations, enables us to extend the life of these orders, because in law, the orders expire after 3 years unless the authority seeks an extension. And that's what we're looking to do with these orders. Generally speaking, we think the orders have performed well, and they've provided a good base off which to make the public aware of the behaviours in certain areas and ask the public or individuals not to engage in those behaviours, but also it gives powers to enforcement officers to enforce where necessary. So the orders that were agreed and came into force in 2022 involved issues around the consumption of alcohol, the intentional feeding of gulls. And that's a bit of a strange one. People raise their eyebrows at that one sometimes. But where feeding of gulls does take place regularly, particularly in resort areas where there are hot food takeaways, the gulls' behaviour does get changed, and they enjoy being fed with the odd chip. And it gets to the point where if they see chips, they will come and swoop and attack, and it can lead to some significant injuries. Aggressive begging, that was a particular provision that was put into place in the Weymouth town centre area and has allowed us to work with people who are on the streets in very unfortunate circumstances, to work with them and to signpost them rather than to engage in aggressive begging, which can be quite upsetting for people. Also, another Weymouth-centric one was cycling on Weymouth Esplanade, and it was picking up an old bylaw that legally couldn't be renewed on Weymouth Esplanade, so we've incorporated it in the ASB PSPO. Unauthorised camping on beaches was really a feature that came to play during the COVID epidemic, where certainly down in Dorset, members will remember that when travel restrictions were in place, international travel restrictions were in place, Dorset did experience a high volume of people coming to the coast. Accommodation was restricted, and quite a lot of unauthorised camping took place on beaches. And it's the aftermath of that which was causing problems with camping equipment, lack of public toilet facilities, washing facilities, meant that areas, often in areas of outstanding natural beauty, were being severely affected. And then the last issue that was covered with the 2022 orders was the lighting of fires on open land. And again, this was specifically due to the Wareham Forest fire that took place, this is testing my memory, I think in 2020, was the real big one, devastating fire. And the council at the time wanted to do all that it could to work with Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue, Dorset Police and other agencies to try and prevent such circumstances rising again. And so there was an ASB order specifically for Wareham Forest. So if the council is seeking to extend existing orders, we can extend by up to 3 years, and that's what the proposal is today, is to extend those orders for a further 3 years. We are required to undertake a limited consultation, not a full public consultation, but a limited one, with some of the agencies that are mentioned there. And all of those agencies have been consulted with, along with relevant town and parish councils, to see what their views are on those current orders, whether they've performed well, whether they would like to see them extended for a further 3 years. Sorry, I've gone too fast there. The consultation results were overwhelmingly positive for the extension of the 3 orders. And there is information in the appendices to the report where you can see which agencies were consulted and what their summary responses were. And then as a background paper to the report, the individual responses are listed as well. So if any member wants to see the full information and the consultation responses, please do let me know and I'll make sure that's provided. But the summary was that the agencies there want to see the existing orders extended for a further 3 years. And so that forms a recommendation in the report today. Alongside the extension of those orders, we are today proposing 2 new orders. The first one is a separate open land number 2 order, and this has come about at the request of Dorset Heaths Partnership, who would like to extend the order prohibiting the lighting of fires on open land to other vulnerable landscapes within the Dorset Council area. And you'll be aware that over the past few weeks and months, there have already been a number of fires on large stretches of open land in the Dorset and DCP council areas. So this new order is looking to widen the restrictions on the lighting of fires to other vulnerable land in Dorset. The second order is to extend the prohibition on camping, unauthorised camping on beaches to Studland Beach, which is maintained by the National Trust. And again, it's come at the request of the National Trust, possibly because the restriction on the other beaches has shifted some of the camping along the coastline up to Studland. But for whatever reason, Studland Beach wasn't included in the original order, and it seems sensible that we should include it in a new separate order to bring it in line with other beaches along our coastline. The new orders need to go out to a full public consultation, and the orders went out for a 12-week public consultation. Both orders received significant majority support, up in the 90%. Where issues that were mentioned in the consultation responses, I've bundled into three areas. Firstly, there was a concern about whether Dorset Council has the necessary enforcement resource to enforce the provisions, and I understand that point. We are limited in our resource, and we have to be really focused about where that resource is deployed. What we have done is, where possible, authorise officers working for other agencies to be able to enforce the provisions. So, for example, Forestry England officers are authorised to take enforcement action in the Wareham Forest area for the lighting of fires. And we're working with Dorset Heath's partnership to try and establish a similar model there to increase our enforcement base. Secondly, we had a number of requests for other areas to be included within PSPO boundaries, particularly in the open land order. There were two well-constructed requests from Swanage Town Council and Portland Town Council asking for land in their area to be included. We have looked to limit the land that's included in the proposed open land order to those large stretches of land where a fire can quickly get out of control and lead to fairly important consequences for the vulnerable habitat and also for human life as well. The issues experienced in other areas tend to be where the hot coals of barbecues have been discarded in an incorrect way and have caused a danger to people who are subsequently walking across that land. However, officers do recognise that there are issues in relation to open land, smaller pockets of open land, and we will be engaging with town councils such as Swanage and Portland to see how we can assist in the problems they're experiencing. And then we had some other feedback to say, well, we think this is a bit petty, harmless, these are fairly harmless activities. We don't think they should be covered by legislation. But I do have to say that was a very small number of responses. There are full consultation reports attached in the appendices to this report today. So, if you just give me a moment to stop sharing the screen, which my technology is, there we go, right, okay. So today the report in front of you has three recommendations. Firstly, to recommend to Cabinet that the existing public spaces protection orders for ASB be extended for a further 3 years. The second recommendation is to consider the consultation results for the two new orders that are proposed and make any comment on those consultation results. And the third recommendation, subject to the second, is to refer the two new proposed orders to Cabinet in June for approval. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tarr first.
Just a quick question. I read it all through at times. Towards the end of it, National Trust, they have a problem. The National Trust say they have a problem on the Poole Harbour beaches as well as on the Studland beach. What was the outcome of that request to cover the Poole Harbour side of things? Because it seems to be a problem which I think the National Trust would enforce if they had the power to.
Thank you. I'm not aware of being approached by the National Trust in respect of other beaches. Certainly, we can look in the consultation response and take a look at that. The new proposed open land order was very much inspired by an approach from Dorset Heaths Partnership, and that's who we've worked with. They include a lot of organisations, including the National Trust, and they have done the significant liaison with their members to agree the land that's been put forward into the order today. But certainly that doesn't preclude further consideration in the future.
Councillor Gibson next.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simon Gibson, representing Verwood, which is one of the wards that's got a significant amount of the identified sites in it. On the three recommendations, I fully support all three. If I start in order, the existing PSPOs being renewed for another 3 years for me is very sensible. I think the case has been well made for all of them. And I think let's keep going, because actually there was a reason why they were put in, and I think they are proving to be effective. I want to spend the majority of my time talking about the open space number 2 proposal for the new orders, and just to say how much I welcome this. As somebody whose ward is bordered by heathland, we've had a number of exceptional fires incredibly close to homes, including my own, and where some people might feel in the consultation responses that actually this is quite harmless, maybe petty to try and intervene in the way that we're proposing. The facts simply don't back that up from my perspective. What happened at Wareham showed us what can happen if these things are unaddressed. And as I understand it, the working assumption for that fire was that it was unintentional. This wasn't a case of arson, it was a case of somebody doing something in that forest that caused an unintentional fire. And for me, that starts to build a case for why intervention is needed, even though it's never often my instinct. So the lighting of fires, the setting off of fireworks, Chinese lanterns, these are fun, but they've got to be done in the right place, and they've got to be done in areas where the consequences aren't quite as high as they can be on our protected heathland. It's always seemed perverse to me that the development constraints that we put on 400 metres within a heathland is so absolute in so many cases, yet in some cases you can still light a fire, set off fireworks. For me, that strikes me as inconsistent, so I welcome the change. And this in my ward has had a remarkable amount of interest, far more than I would have expected. So I know that a significant number of the consultation responses are from the Verwood area, showing that there is actually an appetite in those areas that have been affected by fires in the past. So for me, it's an absolute yes. I'm really grateful to have seen it. There's only 2 points I'd like to make about what happens next. So for me, the point about enforcement is the main one that's been raised with me. Lots of people saying, love to see the order. I think it's very sensible. Can we realistically enforce it? So I don't think that's something we can address via the PSPO solely, because in many ways you can't enforce until you have the PSPO in place. But long term, I do think we need, as we're expanding the number of areas that have a PSPO, we might need to expand our enforcement capacity in turn, because I think it would be strange to not do that. The other bit is about areas that are outside it. I hope this goes to Cabinet, gets agreed by the Cabinet and gets put into place ASAP. We will need to do number 3 straight away, in my perspective, because I think order number 1 was experimental for one area, off the back of a particularly bad set of circumstances. Order number 2 is a natural expansion of it and a sensible place to start. But I think we now need to go and perhaps be a little bit more open-minded about the next phase. Ask the town and parish councils about their areas. Ask the public about areas that haven't been included in either of the first 2 orders, because I know the submission from the Old East Dorset Environment Partnership proposed quite a few other areas that are relatively small in and around the order. So as we seek to expand this, which I think we should, I think the approach we take next time, I'd like us to be a little bit more open-minded about how we seek sites at the earlier stage so that we can add them in at the appropriate point in time, rather than have to go through order 3, then order 4, then order 5. But otherwise, I'm delighted to say it.
Thank you. Do you want to make any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. pleased to hear the support. I think a key issue alongside enforcement is awareness as well. And I think just by having this discussion and by having the reports come through this process raises that awareness of the issue, and it's really good to hear. I was surprised at the level of consultation responses on both proposed new orders, and the consultation team was surprised as well in the level of interest on both the open land and fires and also the camping PSPO. So, it's good to understand that our residents are concerned about these issues. Raising awareness is key, particularly for those people who come into our area on holiday or something like that. They don't know the issues, they don't know about Wareham Forest Fire and the more recent ones. And raising that awareness and putting the signage up is really helpful to help people understand why we're saying this as well. And on the point about further areas, happy to work on further areas over the course of the next few months. We do take our lead a lot from Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service and would welcome their involvement in a discussion with town councils around that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor's next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Councillor David Taylor, Chelmsford St Mary. I'm pleased to see this because it's given a huge benefit of educational needs for our Dorset Council and also across the country, because people come to our council about standard beauty and they treat it with respect. And that's why I'm very pleased about this. I too am very pleased with these orders completely. Only one question, things that was on the Studland one, the range, as you said about the officers monitoring it and making sure it was being enforced. Would the cost go to Dorset Council or would it go to the National Trust? Because that's the thing that worries me about we are incurring a cost against things. That is the only thing, apart from that, outstanding. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have looked to involve our partners in the funding model as well. So, for example, Forestry England bear the costs of enforcement on their land. We're having those similar discussions with the Dorset Heaths Partnership. They will be funding the signage. And with Studland Beach and the National Trust, they've been party to those discussions as well. Now, at the moment, there aren't any proposal for National Trust officers to be designated as enforcement officers. There are responsibilities that come with being an enforcement officer, both in the way that you treat the people that you're dealing with and also your own personal safety. So I think that's a longer discussion with the National Trust. But certainly the signage costs and any costs that we incur through taking a prosecution, we would be expecting the landowner or the land manager to meet. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Wilson next.
Ben Wilson, South East Purbeck, which includes Studland. I very much welcome the introduction of the PSPO over the Studland beaches. I know for a fact that the National Trust spend tens of thousands of pounds a year just clearing up litter along the Studland Peninsula, and this is one step towards bringing some of that actual financial cost, but also environmental cost down. So I do welcome that. I would like to follow on from a comment made by Councillor Tarr. It is in the report, the National Trust do request that this PSPO is extended beyond the immediate Studland beaches and in fact across the whole of the Studland Peninsula. I fully support that view, as does the Parish Council of Studland and the ferry company, who are the owners of Ferry Road, that would then be included within that area. So I do ask that that is noted, and we do look to extend this PSPO at a future date. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Northam, Upwey and Broadway Ward. I feel very much more educated than previous, so thank you for that. Yesterday, I was with the World Heritage site discussion. One of the questions that came up was, could PSPOs be used to protect the cliffs from unwanted fossil collecting causing cliff damage? So perhaps we could have a conversation about that outside of this meeting. And the second one was, I think it's when this came through Weymouth Town Council back in 2022, we were concerned about barbecue use on our open spaces. And one of the things we did do was we made provision for barbecue sites with concrete slabs and metal bins for taking that away, because I think people will always have that desire, and if you don't accommodate it in a safe way, they may well find an unsafe way to do it. So thank you.
Right.
Just say that I would fully support the National Trust wanting to cover those extra areas, because without that it would really be quite ineffective. And I worked there for 15 years on the site with the National Trust, and I think that's very important.
Thank you, Councillor Tarr. I think that pretty much everyone has indicated has spoken now. Are we all happy to put forward the 3 recommendations en bloc to Cabinet? So all those in favour? Any against? No, which is thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Right, moving on to item 8, report on grants for direct community benefit in the policy.
Thank you, Chair. Simon Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance. So as someone representing Dorset Council, but also involved in the charity sector in Dorset, I'm really pleased to be bringing forward this report. This paper proposes an alternative model of commissioning work or activity for our voluntary community and social enterprise sector that streamlines the process for them and for us and is more cost effective. We will continue to have all the necessary checks and balances in place, as you would anticipate, to ensure that we get value for money for the Dorset Council taxpayer. But by bringing in this new approach, it will reduce the burden on charities, groups and organisations in the voluntary sector. This will enable them effectively to apply for grants with more certainty, reduce the bureaucracy, red tape and cost to that sector, and still enable the work that they secure to be monitored and assessed more readily by us. So I'll end my introduction there. We have Laura here to give any further details and willing to take questions. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the paper. So back in 2014, National Government Cabinet Office introduced a framework for general grants known as commission grants. So these grants are closely related in administration to contract procurement while still remaining legally distinct. So the main purpose of these grant functioning standards is to set out the expectation of the management of grants and to promote the efficient and effective grant making to ensure funding is used as intended and provides value for money through high quality delivery. The grant standard has been widely adopted across other statutory sector bodies. So following agreement with the Dorset Council Commercial Board, it was agreed that we would develop a commission grants policy with supporting guidance and processes to ensure Dorset Council has a consistent and fully auditable process to the commission grants for the purpose of direct community benefit. So this is defined in the policy as programmes and or activities specifically designed to address identified local community needs and improve the overall health and well-being of the community. That may include addressing health and other inequalities, driving sustainability of services or resources within the community, and supporting neighbourhood health initiatives. So the draft policy authorisation form known as a case for commission grant and supporting guidance documents have all been developed in consultation with senior commissioners across the authority and also key stakeholders and councillors and stakeholders including the voluntary community sector. These are all detailed in full in appendices 1, 2 and 3. So the policy lays out following information for commissioners. So what is considered out of scope of the policy, information for commissioners on deciding between a commission grant and a contract, because there will be cases when actually a contract is still very much applicable and should be and much more appropriate than a commission grant. It talks through the management of risk, compliance and supporting documents, subsidy control and authorisation levels, information on which of the two commissioned grant processes may be suitable. So within the policy, we are proposing two processes. One is a direct award and one is an expression of interest for a commission grant award. It also talks through data sharing, promotion and monitoring, annual reporting of the policy and the individual grants. So I've come here today to ask for recommendations that members of the Place and Overview Committee review and comment on the Commission Grants Policy and approve its progression through to Cabinet for discussion and approval. And second of all, to approve the recommendation that a status report goes to the Commercial Board and the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee on an annual basis, so you continue to have oversight of how this is being delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jesperson, the first one up with their hand.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Terrace Ward. I'm delighted to see this. Anything that you introduce with the word streamlining has to be a good thing, because the more we can make this easier for people, the better. So in principle, absolutely 100% in favour of this. I've just got 2 or 3 really small little queries about literally about wording, not about the principle or anything, because I read it not as a Dorset Council person, but as a person who might be saying, how do I go about this from a very small organisation? And 2 or 3 things kind of jumped off the page at me. So the first one is on page 130, and you referred, Laura, to how you define direct community benefit. And then you've got 3 bullet points. It seems to me these 3 bullet points are a bit random, and I wonder if they're really helpful, these may include, because surely it may include a lot more than that. And they're also quite closely clustered around health benefits. And so if I was an ordinary person applying for a grant not very experienced, that might narrow the focus of what I thought this applied to. And I don't think that's what you meant to say. So I'm just querying whether those are actually that you've defined it. Those 3 bullet points, I don't think they're terribly helpful. Perhaps you could have just either make the list longer so that it's more inclusive, or I personally am not sure it adds anything. The second bit of wording that jumped out to me was on page 132, and that was when we're looking at the performance management, which is at the second of these block boxes. And under the performance management for a grant, it includes general obligations around behavioural change. I read that 3 times. I've absolutely no idea what we meant by that. Could we put that into ordinary people's language? I expect I could work it out, but it jumped out as a little bit of a barrier, because behavioural change can mean something quite specific if you're the person applying for a grant for the football club or something, and they're not getting behavioural change, they're getting kids playing football. You see, yeah. So I again, and that's important, because on page 38, under monitoring and viewing, you've said agreed outcomes are part of the monitoring. Well, we haven't been very clear about what kind of agreed outcomes we'll be looking for. So it's just that, and that was my next point, was the 134. You said small organisations or newly emerging organisations that don't have their own bank account recommend that they go to their town and parish council. Town councils, I'm sure that would work well. Some of my parish councils, if an organisation went to them and said, could you be our bank account, that would be really quite demanding. That they are sometimes 6 people and they work twice a month and they can barely run their own bank account. So I think we have to allow for what we mean by parish councils. I don't think that's a fair or a realistic ask. So perhaps we need to rethink where those people are going to go. And also the thing that you need to understand is, for parish councils now, for setting up bank accounts or doing anything on their bank account, it's phenomenally technically difficult because they're not allowed to do online banking. They have to have 2 signatories. They have to go to a branch. Well, that sometimes means if you're in North Dorset, you might have to travel a lot of miles to get. So it's a thing that they avoid. You know, it's a big admin thing for them. So could we look again at that one? Because I don't think that's a reasonable ask. And then finally, on page 138, when we're looking at the all-important point of this, which needs to be in here, which is the monitoring, review and evaluation. First of all, excellent. The thought that struck me is, do we have the resource to do that level of monitoring? That's a lot of work. So I'm not saying it shouldn't be there, but have we got the resource to do that level of monitoring for each of our grants? And alongside that, you also say that the monitoring will be proportionate to the size of the grant. Now, my worry there is that we set up this really excellent scheme, if that's how we're going to monitor it. It proves too onerous for officers to do that. So therefore, the threshold at which you get a very soft hands-off monitoring, the threshold of that grant will go up and up till you're, so the proportionate to the size of the grant would not be the number you first thought of, if you see what I mean. So could we again, can you reassure me that you've thought about this and you've actually got the resource to do that? And could we be a bit more specific about what proportionate to the size of the grant might mean in real life? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So it's still green. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Councillor Jesperson. Regarding the 3 bullet points, so that guidance and the definition is very much for the commissioners about how they're going to be offering grants. So it's really to make sure and to really define that these commission grants are purely and used for community benefit from our side when we're offering out that level of work. But I do take your point. I think I will expand it a little bit further. And the same again for your comment about the general behaviour change. Absolutely, that is essentially a little bit jargonistic. Regarding the town and parish councils, very much I take your point. We recently had a case with our competitive grant funds where a small organisation didn't have a bank account, and we were trying to give them options on how they could get a bank account or manage their money, because they wanted it to go into an individual's account, and obviously that isn't appropriate for us. So it is an option that some small organisations have done, but we can use our infrastructure organisations and see whether that's a route we can explore. And I very much get your point about the making sure the monitoring is proportionate. So once again, it's for that commissioner when they give that grant to agree that level of monitoring. So we would expect the service to have that resource to be able to do that. So some of these commission grants might be for £300,000 or £400,000. So we would fully expect that to be, quarterly monitoring, full reports, outcomes as well. Whereas if the grant is for, £3,000 to support a very small local group with, for example, a lunch club, once again, for it to be proportionate and not for it to be, full reporting and, quarterly meetings and everything. On the staff support pages, we are going to put some guidance about what is proportionate and what we'd expect at different levels, but I appreciate that information is not available here today. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add, they're really good points, and I'm very grateful you made them. I also looked at the 3 bullet points, and I didn't know why health and other inequalities were on the same line, because that doesn't make sense. So I think there's some changes that we can make there that would be helpful to you. Don't lose sight of the fact that previously these awards would have been through a contract. And so it would have a contract manager assigned to them. So I get what you say about the resourcing, but it's in place. And it's just a different way of doing it that means hopefully a slightly lighter touch. And I think you're right to raise questions that come through about scheme of delegation, as we'll discover over the next few days and weeks. This council has got some weaknesses, so I think it's absolutely valid to keep an eye on that.
Councillor Northam.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Northam, Upwey and Broadway Ward, Weymouth. I go back to page 131, if I may, reading this through, when I started, I hadn't got a clue what it was on about, but by the summary that you've given has helped me. But I spotted in part, there's a section 2, not in scope of this policy. The first bullet states that Dorset Council Community Infrastructure Levy and Section 106 funds that should be excluded. These have been devolved to town and parish councils. And I don't know that that's an accurate statement. I'm conscious that as a town council, we receive a proportion of the SIL, but the remaining portion of the SIL remains with Dorset Council. I'm not quite sure. I know that we receive Section 106 funds for specific developments for specific ring-fence purposes, but again, I don't know whether that leaves any Section 106 funds still with Dorset Council for wider issues, particularly if it's cross-parish boundaries. So it's a technical question, which I don't ask for an answer now, but please take away unless you know the answer. Yep, sorry.
Thank you, yes. And we will change the wording. The reason why that's not in scope, which I appreciate isn't that clear in that wording, is because there is a separate policy for Dorset Council officers working with town and parish councils around SIL money. So they are out of scope of all of our other... Absolutely, yes. So I'll change the wording. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? That was okay. That was Gibson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simon Gibson, representing Verwood. It seems like a very sensible approach. I like the idea that it feels as though it's empowering the commissioners a bit more, which is sensible. I think we've got to trust our experts within a framework that we find acceptable from a scrutiny perspective. I feel that the ability to sort of agree a tailored approach for each grant in terms of how often they'll be scrutinised seems very sensible indeed. In Appendix 1, the Part 3 of it, it talks about the sort of the things that it will not be funded by a commissioned grant. I suspect some of these things are vanishingly rare, but I just would a little bit of clarification if I could. It's particularly relevant for those of us in the East where a lot of our services are either in BCP or into the very west of Hampshire. It talks in the report, I think it's bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it talks about it will not fund commissioned grants in organisations where the use of the commissioned grant is outside the Dorset Council area, and then specifies that that does include BCP. Just to double check, is that we won't fund it if it's wholly used outside or if it's part used outside? The reason I know this is my own town council gets asked for grants or SLAs along on issues that where we're being asked to provide funding towards something of which some of it is used outside of the area, but some of it very much is used within the area. And in essence, if we don't fund it, it won't come to Verwood. So I'm thinking about maybe some of the conversations that you and I have had over emails in the last couple of days around trying to make sure older persons provision in the East is as consistent as it is across Dorset Council. If there was an I suspect the answer might well be that this is dealt with by contract as opposed to by a grant. But if there was a body that, for example, just existed just across the border into Ringwood or just across the border into, say, into Kinston, that where we don't have the capacity in-house or in Dorset to do that, but that body exists, I just want to double check that this doesn't preclude us from granting that. And then, probably not for wider discussion, but I've always found it a shame that religious groups are excluded, because I often find they add tremendous value to our capacity on these things. I appreciate that's a losing battle. It's never been won. I just like saying it every time I get the chance.
Thank you very much. So just to confirm the first point, Dorset Council funds, because this is our core funding, must only be used in Dorset Council area. However, we often do fund organisations that operate in the BCP area of Somerset or Surrey, and in the grant conditions or contract conditions, we just stipulate that that funding is for the residents of Dorset Council. So, for example, if I use Age UK, Bournemouth Pool and East Dorset, so they do a lot of work in Wimborne and surrounding areas. Previously, we have given them grants, and we just stipulate within the conditions that that money is ring-fenced for the residents of Dorset Council area and cannot be used for the residents of Bournemouth and Poole. So it's really important that, obviously, because organisations don't recognise our borders, so we have to make sure that our communities on the borders are able to access those services, but also safeguarding Dorset Council funds for our benefit of our residents. With regards to the religious groups, we often do fund religious groups for community benefit, for wider community benefit, but just not for the promotion of religious activity. So there's a very distinct differences between that. And I completely agree with you. Obviously, within our food security arena, almost all of our food banks and some of our social supermarkets are very much run by religious organisations and all very independent, and they do a wonderful job for all of our residents within that community, so they're not excluded that way. However, if they wanted some funds for promotion of, for example, Christianity, we have to ensure that all of our residents, regardless of religious belief, can benefit from that funding.
Thank you very much. Just very, very quickly on those things. I suspect a lot of this is internally focused at the minute. When it comes to putting the promotion out there about how we apply for grants, can we just make that point about the BCP is not excluded a bit more clearly in what we send out to the people that might be applying? Because I'm hugely reassured otherwise by what you've said, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? No, okay. We have, again, the recommendation on paper. There are 2 parts to it. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, the draft place and resources overview work programme for the future. As I was just commenting to our service officer, the work programme is looking a bit thin. Amazing enough, hours and hours of this in the last 6 months. We actually achieved an awful lot. So I think we need to have a serious talk about a few more issues that we want to investigate properly, and maybe set up some working parties and that sort of thing, probably in the next couple of months or so. So I will send around an email whenever I have a chance to think about a bit more about subjects we might want to bear in mind. And if you've got subjects that you think the council's not currently addressing, then just put it forward to me, and I'll see if it fits in with our agendas and criteria. Okay. Yes.
Just quickly, I mean, I have got one. I was going to bring it up, but if you're going to do it through a different means, I'll save it. Can we just ask, when might we expect Hedge to Hedge to be coming to this committee? It seems to have been kicked into the long grass, every pun intended, for quite a long time. And it could be, we've got a time scale on that. I see that the officers have gone, but it would be good to know when that's finally coming back. The people who could answer that question are not in the room. So that turned out to be a rhetorical question, Mr. Chairman, but thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, we have now. So we have no urgent items. We have no exempt business. So that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much indeed.